Chapter 417. Elder, one of the tribe members beside the old man, immediately cried out anxiously, "Shut up, all of you. This is decided." The old man's accent had become much fainter at that moment. In his nervousness, he licked his lips and glared at Su Ming. He hoped that once he sacrificed these three women, he would be able to satisfy Su Ming's current condition and get rid of the terror that made his heart tremble. If he could get rid of it, then he believed that sacrificing these three women was worth it. The three women who flew out were not old. They looked to be in their 20s. They might not be exceptionally beautiful, but they were still passable, especially when their faces were flushed red and their eyes were glazed over. The way they looked as if they were ready to be plucked was enough to make a person's heart flutter. Yet just as the three of them closed in on Su Ming, he lifted his right hand abruptly and pressed it against his chest, coughing out a mouthful of blood. "Get lost!" Su Ming's eyes were bloodshot. As he coughed out that mouthful of blood, a hint of clarity appeared in his eyes. With a low growl, his gaze fell on the ground, and once it fell on the old man's face, he forcefully turned around and turned into a long arc that charged forward, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Only when Su Ming left did the three women shudder, and a hint of clarity appeared on their faces. The other women in the tribe also woke up. Their faces were pale, and the scene just now had terrified them. The monkey-faced old man fell silent for a moment. He looked at the spot where Su Ming had left and did not speak for a long time. As Su Ming charged forward, the clarity in his eyes became weaker. During that instant just now, if he had not struggled desperately and had sex with the three women due to his primal desire, then what awaited him would have been an eternity of depravity. Desire. I will definitely win against it. Su Ming did not go anywhere else, but charged back to the mountain range where his cave abode was located. Before long, when he returned to the mountain range, there was only a hint of clarity left in his eyes. It was about to completely disappear. In fact, he did not even have the time to return to his cave abode. Su Ming lifted his right hand swiftly and pointed at Han Mountain Bell. That bell instantly flew towards him, and once it grew bigger in the sky, Ji Yunhai's corpse fell down. As Madame Ji's aura of death spread out, the puppet that was Ji Yunhai's corpse also lost its intelligence and fell on the ground, unmoving. Right at the moment the clarity in Su Ming's eyes completely disappeared, Han Mountain Bell let out a hum and enveloped him, pinning him to the ground. Booming sounds reverberated from within the bell, along with Su Ming's roars that reverberated in the air. Time passed by bit, and soon dawn arrived. Han Mountain Bell was placed upside down on the ground. Su Ming no longer continued trembling within it. Instead, his body was trembling furiously as he sat cross-legged. It might sound easy to control his desires, but once they were magnified by the peach blossom fiend by several dozens of times, or even nearly 100 times, then it was practically impossible to control them. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed by. During these 3 days, not a single soul came to the area around Su Ming. It did not matter whether it was White Bull Tribe or Black Crane Tribe. Neither of them appeared. In fact, there were no outsiders who passed by either. These 3 days were like 3 years to Su Ming. In fact, it could even be said that it was like 30 years. As he struggled and refused to be controlled by his desires, even if he would occasionally fall into a daze, due to the seal placed on Han Mountain Bell, he could not get out. Once he regained his clarity, he would use all his strength to suppress his desires. During these 3 days, Su Ming's body had become much thinner. His robes were torn, his hair was crimson, and his expression was filled with ferocity. Similarly, an invisible barrier had appeared in his mind during the 3 days of chaos and the madness of his desires. That barrier was like a seal. Su Ming had not known about its existence before, and even now, he still did not know about it. If it was not because that primitive desire had been magnified 100 times and it had not crashed into him and caused him to fall into madness, perhaps that seal would not have appeared. That desire was like an ocean. As it crashed into Su Ming's mind, it was also indirectly crashing into that barrier. 3 days later, at dawn, as Su Ming roared, cracking sounds suddenly came from his mind. It was as if that invisible barrier, that seal that he did not know about, had started showing signs of shattering due to that primitive desire. At the same time, a bang rang out in Su Ming's head. He had struggled for 3 days, but at that moment, he lost consciousness once again. However, even though he lost consciousness, he did not fall unconscious. Instead, he dug his hands into the ground under Han Mountain Bell, lifted his head, and let out a roar that shook the sky and earth even through Han Mountain Bell. As he roared, an indescribably terrifying power erupted from his body. The strength of that power was so great that it immediately pushed away Han Mountain Bell and flung it into midair. At the same time, Su Ming shot up from the ground. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the ground exploded. Su Ming appeared in midair. His breathing was rapid, and there was no longer any rationality in his eyes. Instead, they were bloodshot. The mark of the peach blossom at the center of his brows bloomed in an enchanting manner. His face was pale, but there was a hint of purple on his lips. It was a contrast to his fiery red long hair, causing him to look indescribable. No pupils could be seen in his eyes. Everything he could see was red. As he stood in midair, he stopped roaring after a long while, as if he had suddenly quietened down. After a moment, he slowly turned his head around, and a strange, enchanting smile suddenly appeared on his purple lips. He lowered his head and swept his gaze across the ground. With that one sweep, the ground trembled, as if the power contained in Su Ming's gaze was something that even the ground could not withstand. Some spots even exploded with a bang, and cracks appeared on the ground. When he swept his gaze towards the rod snake, the snake shuddered and immediately curled up on the ground, not daring to meet Su Ming's gaze. Its spiritual sense was telling it that it absolutely could not get close to Su Ming at that moment. Its trembling body seemed to have reached its peak of terror towards Su Ming's gaze. The small virescent sword also immediately fell to the ground and started trembling. Su Ming's gaze paused for a moment on the rod snake's body. Once the red glare in his eyes flashed for a moment, he moved his gaze away from the snake's body. When he retracted his gaze, he lifted his right hand. His fingernails were now 3 inches long and incredibly sharp. At the same time, black light shone from their edges. He seized the air towards the ground. The red ring immediately flew out from the piece of flesh and turned into a long arc that Su Ming caught in his hand. Once he put it on his middle finger, he lifted his head slowly and looked at Han Mountain Bell floating in midair. With a cold harumph, Su Ming pointed towards Han Mountain Bell. Immediately, the bell let out a powerful bell chime, and suddenly, the 9-headed dragon's gigantic body appeared in midair. Su Ming's body was no longer within the 6 awakened heads. Instead, they were all crimson red, and they were roaring at Su Ming ferociously. As for the 3 heads that had yet to wake up, they were trembling non-stop, as if they did not dare face Su Ming, just like the rod snake. In the face of the 9-headed dragon's roars, Su Ming took a step forward. With that one step, he arrived beside Han Mountain Bell. He completely ignored the roaring, 9-headed dragon and lifted his right hand to press on the bell. The instant his right hand fell, the 9-headed dragon let out a shrill scream of pain. The 3 heads that had their eyes closed opened their eyes at the same time. Their eyes were crimson red, and the 9 heads roared at the same time. Su Ming lifted his right hand, and Han Mountain Bell instantly shrank. Even the 9-headed dragon on it disappeared. Su Ming opened his mouth and swallowed the bell. Once he finished doing all this, he seized the air in the direction of the sky with his right hand. With it, the entire sky instantly distorted, as if it was being sucked in by Su Ming, and he swung his arm outwards. A screen of light immediately appeared beneath Su Ming, enveloping the entire circular area of 100,000 feet, including the puppet, rod snake, and the mountain range in his cave abode. It was as if he had sealed everything within it. Su Ming stood outside the screen of light and lifted his head to look at the sky. After remaining silent for a moment, he suddenly let out a low roar. His roar did not sound strong, but it caused the weather to change. Even the moon in the sky looked as if it was about to shatter. A powerful wave of ripples spread out in all directions, and as it rumbled, it reverberated through the entire sky. A gigantic vortex appeared in the dark sky, and as it rotated, Su Ming's roar traveled even further into the distance. "I like red," Su Ming mumbled hoarsely. Su Ming mumbled hoarsely. A red robe appeared abruptly on his body, and it complemented his long red hair, causing him to look incredibly enchanting at that moment. The instant Su Ming, whose presence had changed drastically after he woke up, roared, there was a mountain surrounded by a sea of clouds in the land of the shamans. There was a hall at the top of that mountain, and within that hall was an old man with white hair. That old man sat alone, and there were 9 skulls placed around him. Each of those skulls was burning with green light. The old man's face was calm, but at that moment he suddenly opened his eyes. His expression changed, and he stood up swiftly. The flames on the 9 skulls around him were instantly extinguished. This presence, who is it? An old man in Taoist robes was walking slowly in the sky in the land of the shamans. There was a huge sword under his feet, and he was slicing through the air at an incredibly quick speed. Yet at that moment, the sword suddenly shuddered, and the old man came to an abrupt halt. His expression instantly changed drastically. Whose presence is this? He immediately lifted his right hand and started forming a seal to make a deduction. But when he was halfway through, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. There were many people walking out from various spots in the land of the shamans at that moment. Shock appeared on their faces, and among these shocked people were immortals and shamans. An Autumn Sea tribe. Zhongzhe was sitting cross-legged on the giant turtle. The tribe was still migrating, and they were about to reach their destination. His expression was calm, and his long hair fell to the ground. But at that moment, he opened his eyes swiftly, and a hint of shock appeared on his face. The power of that roar. His eyes sparkled, and he suddenly stood up to look at the sky in the distance. Wan Xiu was by his side. When she saw the change in Zhongzhe's expression, she looked towards him. "Sir, Zhongzhe, a powerful shaman who has surpassed the state of End has appeared in the land of the shamans. He let out that roar just now. This person's strength. Who is he?" Zhongzhe mumbled and sucked in a deep breath. "I think these 2 chapters are pretty good. I'm asking for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 4:18. I'm still a few hundred votes away from first place. I'll start exploding tomorrow, and I'll do so for 3 consecutive days. Fellow Taoists, please help Air Jin regain first place. First place. First place, I'll only fight for first place this month. Right now, Air Jin's blood is boiling, and the plot of seeking the devil has reached a critical moment. Fellow Taoists, let's make our move. Let's roar when we see the votes. Let's make our move when it's time. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 4:19. The limited number of powerful berserkers in the land of the shamans noticed Su Ming's roar. At the same time they were shaken by his appearance. There was an underground palace located deep underground within Sky Mist City. The underground palace was built differently from the buildings in the land of the berserkers. It was octagonal in shape and was made entirely of spirit stones. It shone with a colorful light, and even though it was underground, it still shone brightly, and there was a thick spiritual aura spreading out from it. There were 8 doors on the octagonal building, and all of them were tightly shut at that moment. Right at the center of the building was a great hall, and there were 2 gigantic statues there. One of them was wearing a long robe, and there was a picture of a taiji symbol sewn on his chest. That person was forming seals with his left hand behind his back, and his right hand was fiddling with his beard. He might just be a statue, but his gaze was still as sharp as lightning, and he looked as if he was alive. The other statue was of a middle-aged man with the air of an immortal. That man was still wearing a long robe, but there was no picture of a taiji symbol on his robe. Instead, there was a thin and long leaf. That leaf was emerald green and exuded an overflowing life force. The middle-aged man had a grim expression on his face, and there was an awe-inspiring look in his eyes. He lifted his right hand and formed a seal, then placed his left hand on his right, as if he was casting some sort of powerful divine ability. There were 5 stone chairs hidden in the shadows under the 2 statues. At that moment, there were people sitting on 3 of them, but the faces of 2 of them could not be seen clearly. Only the 3rd stone chair had the face of Sky Mist's ancestor. He had a dark expression on his face, and it could be seen clearly. A mysterious, powerful berserker has appeared in the land of the shamans. You heard his roar just now. This person shouldn't be someone from Hidden Dragon's sect who descended here. After all, there are still 3 years until the day he descends. No sect has the ability to descend earlier. They can only come here through the rune on the World Mountain at the appointed time. One of the 2 people hidden in the shadows said hoarsely. It's also impossible for him to be someone from Great Leaf Immortal Sect. There are very few berserkers from Great Leaf Immortal Sect who descended here. I don't think there are more than 3 of them. They're all in the main tribes and sects in the land of berserkers. They won't go to the land of the shamans. No matter who this mysterious, powerful berserker is, we can't allow him to destroy our plans. Since he appeared in the land of the shamans, then Hidden Dragon sect will definitely take action to deal with him. In truth, I still don't understand. The god of berserkers in the land of berserkers is already dead, and a new god of berserkers can no longer appear. Of berserkers, there is no need for the immortals to be afraid. Most of the shaman's legacy of Ninely tribe has also disappeared. Right now, there's only a hint of it left. Even if we manage to obtain it, we can only reach ascendance. Sky Mist sect can just send out any one of our seniors, and we can slaughter the entire berserker tribe. Why do we have to go through so much trouble to have us work together with the other 2 sects and carry out the plan to descend over the past thousands of years? You descended a few years ago, so you don't know the details of this place. If this place was really that simple, I wouldn't have spent most of my life here. We can't appear, and we even have to suppress our cultivation bases. We can't bring out the presence of immortals that is too strong, or else... Hey, you can go and try. The person who spoke was Sky Mist's ancestor. Fellow Taoist Sky Mist has been here for thousands of years, and his understanding of this place far surpasses mine and fellow Taoist Sun Yang's. We will listen to fellow Taoist Sky Mist, but I'm also curious as to just what sort of secrets exist in the land of berserkers. Fellow Taoist Sky Mist, you've been here for a long time. Have you discovered anything? You're too polite, fellow Taoist Chong. Sky Mist's ancestor smiled faintly. His tone towards Chong had softened. He was very concerned about that person's identity. I might have an ordinary status in the sect, but after all, I have been in the land of berserkers for thousands of years. I believe that I have a decent understanding of this place. There is a secret in this place. I don't know about it, but if I dare to reveal the presence of immortals here without holding anything back, then the only outcome for me will be death. As for the secret of the land of berserkers, I believe that the sect leader and the sect elders know about it. Our plan is to open the tunnel to descend here so that the sect leader and the others can descend here with their full power. But since fellow Taoist Chong asked about it, I've been analyzing it over the years, and I feel that the secret of this place is related to how we came to the land of berserkers. Sky Mist's ancestor hesitated for a moment before he spoke in a low voice. Are you saying? Chang's eyes went wide, and he grabbed the armrest of the stone chair with his right hand. That's just my suspicion. After all the fellow Taoists who have come to the land of berserkers, even the evil sect in Eastern Wastelands, have come from the same place. They can only descend here through that person. It's a pity that that person's body is surrounded by a powerful sealing fog. I can't see his face clearly, or else I might have been able to find some clues. There was a moment of silence in the underground palace. After a long time, the man, surnamed Chong, sighed. If that's the case, then let's not continue guessing. If it's really related to that person, then it's definitely not something we can participate in. We just need to make a plan. As the 3 of them spoke to each other in the strange place under Sky Mist City, in the depths of the land of berserkers far away from Sky Mist City, was the great tribe of freezing sky. There was an old man with white hair sitting cross-legged in a tower. He opened his eyes swiftly, and shock appeared in them. He quickly stood up and pushed open the door to his room. A gust of cold wind blew into his face, causing his hair to dance. He looked at the sky in the distance with an incredibly solemn expression. After a long while, he lifted his right hand and formed a seal, as if he was calculating something. The air behind him distorted, and a figure dressed in an emperor's robe and a crown appeared indistinctly. Damn it, his seal has loosened. This is something that should be impossible. How'd he do it? This is beyond our plans. We have to figure out the reason why the seal has loosened as soon as possible and find out who has appeared. The white-haired old man frowned, and anxiety appeared on his face. Once he turned around and returned to his house, he immediately sat down cross-legged and continued forming seals with his hands. His eyes shone brightly, and within them, the wind and clouds moved about. He was performing a large-scale calculation. His expression changed. He was first stunned, then shocked, then released a sigh of relief. However, in the end, his expression changed constantly. After some time, he gave up on the calculation and stood there in a daze for a moment. Progenitor Hong Luo. He has appeared, but there are still 3 years until the day he descends. Right now, I can't communicate with Master about this. Oh well, since Master asked me to bring his projection into the land of berserkers, then it must be to prevent any accidents from happening. The old man hesitated for a moment before he gritted his teeth, lifted his right hand, and suddenly pointed behind him. With it, the middle-aged man dressed in an emperor's robe and a crown that appeared behind him immediately gained corporeal form. After a moment, he walked out from behind the old man like a real person and stood in front of him. His face was expressionless, and his expression was aloof. It's a pity that under the interference from the power in the land of berserkers, Master's projection has lost its intelligence and turned into a puppet. It can only act on its instincts and stay here. The old man sighed and got up to bow towards the middle-aged man who looked like an emperor. Master, something unexpected has happened when Destiny's seal was activated. Progenitor Hong Luo has appeared. Please take action and restore order. As the old man spoke, he bit the tip of his tongue. Once he coughed out a mouthful of blood, he swiftly swung his right hand at the blood fog, and it immediately turned into 3 blood-red runic symbols that landed on the emperor's body. A glint appeared in the eyes of the middle-aged man who looked like an emperor, and a hint of intelligence appeared within them. He cast the old man a cold glance, then turned around and took a step forward. His body turned transparent, and he disappeared without a trace. It's a good thing Master gave me this projection, or else I really wouldn't have been able to subdue the awakened progenitor Hong Luo. This shouldn't be a problem. As long as those 3 old coots don't wake up, then it'll be fine. I hope it'll be fine. The old man frowned and shook his head. He did not have much confidence in his heart. The rumors about progenitor Hong Luo that had been circulating in the land of immortals in the past made the old man incredibly wary. It said that progenitor Hong Luo was cruel and incredibly bloodthirsty. He also loved to challenge powerful warriors and kill them cruelly. In the end, Sir Dition took action and sealed him in Destiny's body. The old man sighed. The weather in the entire land of South Morning had changed due to Su Ming's roar. Su Ming, or rather, it would be more accurate to say that he could no longer be called Su Ming, so it was impossible for him to not know about these things. I like the color red, but who am I? The red-haired Su Ming stood in the sky above the land of the shamans. His eyes were bloodshot, but there was a hint of confusion within them. Dition. I'm not Dition. My enemy's name is Dition. After a long while, Su Ming lifted his head swiftly. He did not roar, but the arrogance and stubbornness on his face was incredibly distinct. Dition, you and I are mortal enemies. I'll kill you. Su Ming lifted his right hand swiftly and pushed it in the direction of the ground in the distance. With it, the ground trembled violently, and cracks swiftly appeared on the ground. As they spread out, they covered an area of 100,000 feet. At the same time, Su Ming's right fingers formed the shape of a claw and swiped upwards. Earthen aura, dragon fiend. As Su Ming mumbled under his breath, wisps of white smoke seeped out from the numerous cracks on the ground. As they rose into the air, the ground withered away, as if it had lost its life force. It was as if all the life in the land had been taken away by Su Ming with that one grab. As the white smoke gathered together, it tumbled about furiously, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a gigantic white dragon. That dragon's eyes were bloodshot, and its body was fair, but soon, that white body turned red and turned into a gigantic red dragon that was several tens of thousands of feet big. As it roared, it charged towards Su Ming and stopped under his feet, causing him to stand on its head. Then, with a swing of its gigantic body, it charged into the distance. Su Ming stood on the dragon's head, and his long red hair danced in the wind. Who am I? Just who am I? Su Ming, that's right, I'm Su Ming. My enemy is Di Tian. I'll kill him. A hint of brutality appeared on Su Ming's lips. I'm going to give you my first chapter today. Please give me monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 420. But I shouldn't be this weak. I shouldn't have been this weak. Su Ming stood on the gigantic red dragon. As he charged forward, he lowered his head and looked at his own body. His purple lips moved slightly, and he opened his mouth and sucked in a sharp breath. With that one breath, the weather instantly changed and the wind and clouds tumbled backwards. The power of the world gathered madly from all directions with a shocking presence, and all of it was sucked into Su Ming's mouth. Banging sounds came from his body, and the amount of liquid in the open path in his body instantly increased by several-fold. As it continued increasing, the liquid circulated rapidly through the path. In almost an instant, due to the continuous increase in the amount of liquid, the end of the liquid connected with the end of the path as it circulated through Su Ming's path. At the same time it became complete, booming sounds came from within Su Ming's body. 9 consecutive booming sounds rang out. Once the path in Su Ming's body was connected 9 times, the liquid in the path disappeared in an instant. Almost at the same time it disappeared, a round core the size of a fingernail appeared in Su Ming's abdomen. Golden light spread out from the core, causing Su Ming's body to be surrounded by it. That was not the end. The moment the golden core appeared and Su Ming opened his purple lips to absorb the power of the world, the thick power of the world quickly fused into his path and turned into liquid before circulating through his body once again. Eventually, it fused into the golden core, and this cycle repeated itself. After an unknown number of times, the golden core in Su Ming's Dantian region became the size of a fist. Su Ming charged forward in the sky. Wherever the gigantic red dragon passed by, the shamans on the ground would feel their hearts tremble when they saw it, and fear would appear in their hearts. Su Ming's level of cultivation might not be strong, but as his red hair appeared and his consciousness awakened due to the seal breaking due to his desire, his divine sense appeared on his body with an unimaginable strength. The strength of that divine sense was the source that allowed the powerful berserkers in the land of South Morning to feel as if they had transcended the end. As Su Ming continued absorbing the power of the world, gradually, wherever he went, the world of the shamans would turn dark, as if it had lost its life force. The grass on the ground withered and the clouds in the sky crumbled. However, in exchange for all of this, a crack appeared on the golden core in Su Ming's body. That crack continued spreading out, as if there was a life being born within it. It exuded a unique presence that surrounded Su Ming's body. This body is too weak. It contains my divine sense and can only bring out 1/10 of my power, but with my divine sense, it can become much stronger. Because of that, I can bring out about half of my power. Su Ming mumbled. With bloodshot eyes, he lifted his right hand and struck his body. With that one strike, the cracked golden core in his body immediately exploded, and as it did so, A small person with red hair who looked exactly like him appeared in his body. I'm still too weak. How am I supposed to kill DT with this kind of body and cultivation base? The gigantic crimson dragon beneath Su Ming stopped in midair. As he stood on the dragon's head, his expression turned dark. I can feel that I only have 7 days before I wake up this time. 7 days later, I'll fall into deep sleep once again. 7 days, damn 7 days. No matter what, I won't be able to make this body reach a state where I can kill DT within 7 days. I can only cast a secret art and use it to stimulate me so that I can obtain the strongest power within a short period of time. I remember that there are 2 secret arts that can do this. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and a ghastly look appeared on his face. One of them is the art of Yin obeying the dragon. This secret art requires a virgin who has lived through 9 lives with the extreme Yin constitution. I'll use the power of Yin to fuse with my divine sense, so that my body will be able to bring out all its potential and life force within a short period of time. The other secret art requires me to search for the powerful warriors in this place and absorb the power of essence from their bodies, so that I can become stronger for a short period of time, Su Ming mumbled. Su Ming mumbled. As his eyes sparkled, he spread his divine sense outwards, and as it swept through the land, it covered most of the land of the shamans in an instant. Wherever his divine sense went, it would swiftly search through the area based on his needs. Then Su Ming turned his head around and looked at the sky in the distance. There's no one who fits the requirements for the art of Yin obeying the dragon, but this woman is somewhat passable. As for the second secret art, there are some who fit the requirements. The gigantic crimson dragon beneath Su Ming let out a roar and charged forward with Su Ming into the air, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Not long after, the skies suddenly distorted on a green plain in the land of the shamans. A long crimson dragon roared and charged out without stopping, ramming its head against the ground. As loud booming sounds reverberated in the air, a furious roar traveled forth, and the ground crumbled. A gigantic crack appeared, and an endless amount of red fog appeared as the gigantic dragon crashed into the ground. It surrounded the area, causing the entire place to be covered in red fog. At the same time, that furious roar came from within the fog. A red figure in the sky charged into the fog with a ferocious look on his face. The continuous rumbling only stopped after an hour. As the surroundings became quiet, the red fog gathered together to form the gigantic red dragon once again. It rose from the ground and flew into the sky. As it did so, it revealed a deep pit in the ground, and 2 figures could be seen within it. One of them stood there. He was dressed in a red robe and had a head of red hair. His purple lips gave off an enchanting air. It was the red-haired Su Ming, and he had his right hand pressed against an old man's head. The old man trembled as he knelt before Su Ming. His hands were pressed against the ground, and there was pain on his face. As his body trembled viciously, wisps of white mist seeped out of his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, and seeped into Su Ming's body. This process lasted for a moment before Su Ming let go of his right hand and turned around to take a step into midair. He stepped on the long red dragon, and as the dragon roared, he disappeared into the air. The old man kneeling on the ground coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. His face was pale, and as he looked in the direction Su Ming had left, shock and terror appeared on his face. His body was incredibly weak, but he ignored his weakness and immediately struggled to his feet before quickly leaving the place. Within a mountain range in the land of the shamans were 2 gigantic, ferocious beasts of 10,000 feet. They were fighting against each other. One of the ferocious beasts looked like a tiger, but it had a pair of wings. Its roars shook the sky and earth. The beast fighting against it was a ball of flesh that floated in midair. That ball of flesh continued squirming, and black liquid dripped down from it, letting out magnetic sounds on the ground. There were countless tentacles on its body, and at the end of each tentacle was a gaping mouth. Within those mouths were sharp teeth, and those tentacles were fighting against the tiger-like beast. They had been fighting against each other for several days, but on this day, a blood dragon suddenly shot out of the air above them with a roar. As it charged towards the two ferocious beasts, it stirred up a large amount of red fog. The two ferocious beasts were shocked. When they lifted their heads to look, they saw a red shadow crawling into the fog. Booming sounds reverberated through the fog, mixed with the ferocious beast's roars and roars. After a moment, the red fog gathered into a dragon. Su Ming stood on the dragon's head, and as it rose into the air, he disappeared. The tiger-like beast was dying in the mountain range. As for the disgusting ball of flesh, it had already been split into two. A large amount of black blood had corroded the ground around it and let out a foul stench. The same scene appeared in many places in the land of the shamans that day. The powerful shamans who had hidden themselves were all shocked to find themselves facing an existence that terrified them, and in the end, most of their cultivation bases were sucked away. Most of the ferocious beasts were the same. When night fell, there was a beautiful woman in a valley in the land of the shamans. She was trembling as she stared at the person standing before her. That person wore a red robe and had a head full of red hair. His purple lips exuded a chilling air. It was the red-haired Su Ming. At that moment, he was pointing at the center of the woman's brows with his right index finger. He was frowning, and no one knew what he was thinking about. "Who are you?" The woman's voice was shrill. As her body trembled, there was despair in her eyes. There were 8 corpses around her, and all of them had died horrifying deaths. The woman could not forget what had happened just now. She had been training quietly in this place, and suddenly, the red-haired man had appeared. With just one wave of his hand, all her followers had started fighting each other to death as if they had gone mad. "I'm a disciple of the god of Shaman's Temple. If you dare touch me, then the entire god of Shaman's Temple will definitely not forgive you." The despair in the woman's eyes grew stronger. The red-haired Su Ming remained as calm as ever. He did not bother himself with the woman's shrill cries. His right hand continued pointing at the center of the woman's brows, and after some time, he frowned. "It's a pity. You might be a virgin, but you don't have enough in aura. It must have something to do with the cultivation method you're practicing. You're training here because the in aura here is very thick." Su Ming shook his head and lowered his right index finger from the center of the woman's brows. With a tap on her robes, the woman's robes immediately turned into shreds and disappeared. With tears and hatred in her eyes, the woman closed her eyes. Su Ming swept his gaze past the woman's body. His gaze did not look as if he was looking at a body. It was so aloof that it was as if he was looking at a material. After a long while, he shook his head once again. "You've lost too much of your in aura. You don't meet my requirements." Su Ming turned around and no longer bothered himself with the woman. He was just about to leave. "Just who are you?" The woman's eyes flew open. "My name is Su Ming." With a single move, the red-haired Su Ming disappeared from the place. "Su Ming, Su Ming." The woman gritted her teeth and committed that name to her memory. This day was like a disaster for the powerful warriors of the shaman tribe. As Su Ming discovered new things within the area of his divine sense, as he walked towards them, as he continuously attacked and absorbed the in aura, his cultivation base recovered at a shocking speed, and he became even stronger. "I don't have a lot of monthly votes, and the distance between me and the first place is getting wider, but I have 500 demon lords with me." Chapter 4:21. Autumn Sea Tribe had yet to complete their migration, but they were about to reach their destination. They were moving slowly at the borders of the land of the shamans. There were countless mackerel pikes swimming in the sky, and the turtles on the ground were also moving slowly. The Yin shaman Zong Zhe sat cross-legged on his turtle with a dark expression on his face. No one knew what he was thinking about. Wan Shou also remained silent by his side, occasionally looking at Zong Zhe. Time trickled by. They should have set up camp and rest during the night, but Zong Zhe felt a sense of danger in his heart. That was why he asked the tribe to continue moving through the night, causing the entire tribe to be on guard. Only by doing so could they preserve their combat prowess to the greatest extent when danger descended upon them. Wan Xiu looked at the sky. At that moment, the night sky was filled with stars. The warriors in the tribe were still fine, but the normal people and children were mostly tired. Sir Zhongzhe, should we let the tribe rest for a while? Wan Xiu bit her bottom lip and asked softly. Zhongzhe remained silent for a moment. He was just about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. He stood up swiftly and lifted his head to look at the sky in the distance. His face was incredibly dark. Wan Xiu was momentarily stunned. When she looked over, she did not see any changes in the dark sky in the distance. As she hesitated, suddenly, a ray of red light flashed in the dark sky. It was soon followed by a roar that shook the sky. In the quiet night, that roar rumbled, causing the mackerel pikes in the sky to tremble and the turtles on the ground to also tremble. It was a gigantic red dragon that was 100,000 feet long. That dragon looked as if it had crawled out of thin air. Once it appeared, its roars spread in all directions. Standing on its head was a man in a red robe with long, fiery red hair. That man was naturally Su Ming. However, his current appearance had changed drastically compared to his original appearance. His purple lips made him look even more enchanting. Yet even so, those who had seen him before would still be able to vaguely find traces of Su Ming on his face, just like Wan Xiu at that moment. Once she saw Su Ming, her eyes immediately went wide, and disbelief appeared in her eyes. Even Zhongzhe was stunned when he saw Su Ming. He could clearly tell that the person standing on the blood dragon in the sky was the powerful shaman he had sensed during the day. However, he did not expect that this mysterious powerful shaman would be Su Ming. The other people from Autumn Sea Tribe also recognized Su Ming at the same time. Even the old female ladder shaman was surprised when she saw him. "Why do you come here so late at night?" It did not matter whether this mysterious powerful warrior was Su Ming or not. Zhongzhe was still wary. With a leap, he appeared in midair right before Su Ming. "You are very strong, but you are no match for me." Once Su Ming's crimson eyes swept past Zhongzhe, his gaze fell on the entire Autumn Sea Tribe on the ground. With one sweep, Su Ming's pupils suddenly shrank, and his gaze focused on Wan Xiu. "I came for her." Su Ming lifted his right hand and pointed at Wan Xiu with his 3-inch fingernail on his index finger. When Su Ming pointed at her, Wan Xiu's expression immediately changed. She frowned, and an aloof look appeared in her eyes. "How dare you come to Autumn Sea Tribe and ask for our sacred lady? Aren't you going too far?" Zhongzhe's expression was dark as he spoke coldly. His eyes sparkled, and he was already prepared for a huge battle. "I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm just telling you that I'm taking her away." The red-haired Su Ming's expression was calm. As he spoke, he took a step forward as if he was ignoring Zhongzhe and was about to walk towards Autumn Sea Tribe on the ground. Killing intent shone in Zhongzhe's eyes. He might be wary of the feeling Su Ming gave him at that moment, but he had no choice but to attack. With one move, he charged towards Su Ming in an instant. As he lifted his right hand, a power that could capture souls erupted from Zhongzhe's body. Under that power, his body became indistinct, as if he had become one with the world. The shadow of the candle dragon also appeared faintly behind him. Once a shocking power appeared from Zhongzhe's body. Even the dark sky seemed to have frozen over. Yet the instant he closed in on Su Ming did not even spare him a glance. He only lifted his right hand, and the moment Zhongzhe closed in on him, he formed a seal. Once that seal appeared, Su Ming changed his hand gesture, and in a short span of time, he changed it 9 times. "I will bestow upon you the red eyes of the night," Su Ming said calmly and changed the seals 9 times. Almost every single time he spoke, he would change the seals. Once he finished speaking those 9 words, he pushed outwards. With that one push, 2 red glows suddenly appeared in the dark sky. If anyone took a closer look at those red glows, they would find that they were 2 planets. The instant the 2 planets turned red, a wave of might from the heavens descended and landed on Zhongzhe's body, who was charging towards Su Ming. Zhongzhe's body jolted, and his expression changed drastically. To his shock, he discovered that his body seemed to have been frozen in midair, and he could not move even an inch. "I will bestow upon you the purple lips of the sky." Su-ming walked towards the pail, Wan Xiu calmly. Once he finished speaking, he formed 9 seals with his right hand once again and pushed towards the ground. The ground trembled with a bang, and as if it was melting, layers of ripples appeared on it. Soon after, as those ripples spread out, rays of piercing light shot into the sky. The ground disappeared with that one push from Su-ming. In its place was a bright sky. The ground had turned into the sky. When the people stood on the ground, they felt as if they were standing in the sky. This strange change caused the people from Autumn Sea Tribe to cry out in shock. However, the moment they cried out in surprise, they immediately discovered that their bodies seemed to have been frozen and they could not move even a single inch. That included Wan Xiu and the old ladder shaman. All of them were the same. In the darkness of night, Zhong Zai's pupils constricted, and he began to pant. An expression of disbelief appeared on his face. Although he had anticipated that his opponent would be powerful, he had never imagined that he would be this powerful. This was not some divine ability or magical technique, but rather the materialization of divine sense. He turned his divine sense into his will and sealed all the existences in the night and imprisoned all the living beings in the day. This person, just what level of cultivation does he have? Zhong Zai's face was pale, and shock appeared on his face. Su-ming's red robes fluttered elegantly in the wind. His red hair was evil, his pale face and his purple lips gave him a unique charm. He walked towards Wan Xiu, towards the red-haired Su-ming, his target, under the shocked gazes of the tens of thousands of people from Autumn Sea Tribe, under the apprehension of the powerful end shamans in the sky, and under the low roars of the earthen aura dragon. Wan Xiu's beautiful face was drained of blood. She looked at Su-ming walking towards her, watched him seal their tribe's godlike Zhong Zai with just a lift of his hand, and then sealed the entire ground with just a swing of his hand. This powerful level of cultivation was something she had never seen before in her life. Su-ming closed in slowly, but when he was less than 1,000 feet away from Wan Xiu and looked as if he could reach her with just one step, he suddenly frowned. The instant he frowned, a muffled howl came from the sky in the distance. Along with that howl was a gigantic mackerel pike that covered an incredibly large area and could not be seen with a single glance. That mackerel pike stared at Su-ming as if it was facing a great enemy. At that moment, it was roaring in the sky. It actually possesses the blood of Northern Abyss Sea. Su-ming lifted his head and cast a glance at the gigantic mackerel pike. A brilliant glint appeared in his eyes, and he immediately gave up on walking towards Wan Xiu. Instead, with a glint in his eyes, he flew up in an instant, and with a piercing sound as he sliced through the air, he charged towards the gigantic mackerel pike in the sky. A thick wave of killing intent appeared on his body. The strength of that killing intent was so strong that all the people from Autumn Sea Tribe could sense it clearly. No! Wan Xiu trembled. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she let out a weak, quivering voice. She could feel the killing intent on Su-ming's body. She did not believe that this mackerel pike could win against Su-ming, who could even seal Sir Zhong Zai. Despair appeared in her eyes. Her body trembled viciously. Su-ming's appearance and his strength had caught her completely off guard. In fact, under the seal, her weak voice could only be heard by herself. She could only watch as Su-ming flew up and closed in on the gigantic mackerel pike. She was screaming in her heart, telling the mackerel pike to leave. A shrill roar came from the mackerel pike's mouth in the sky, and along with it, red fog filled the sky. Within the fog, the mackerel pike's shrill cries grew stronger, causing Wan Xiu's heart to feel as if it was being pierced by a sharp knife. The entire land fell silent, including Zhong Zai. Everyone fell silent. An hour later, the fog in the sky dissipated. The mackerel pike was still floating in the sky. Its body had shrunk by quite a bit and was filled with the aura of death, but it was not truly dead. There was still life within it. Su Ming walked down from midair. There was blood at the corners of his mouth. That was the mackerel pike's blood. His presence was clearly much stronger than before. Since you don't want it to die, then I'll spare its life. Su Ming walked towards Wan Xiao and stood before her. He lifted his right hand and placed it at the center of the woman's brows. After a long while, a smile appeared on his face. Not bad. It might not really fit, but it'll do. As Su Ming spoke, he hugged Wan Xiao and turned around, intending to leave. Yet just as he took a few steps forward, he suddenly turned his head around, and his bloodshot eyes fell on the old ladder shaman from Autumn Sea tribe standing not too far away. I don't know why, but I dislike you among these people. As Su Ming spoke, the red glare in his eyes shone, and he turned around to leave. The moment he left, the old woman's face instantly turned red, as if all her blood was boiling. Pain appeared on her face, and, after a moment, her head exploded with a bang. Her entire body was torn to shreds. At the same time, wisps of white mist floated out of her body as she died. A part of it seeped into Su Ming's body, while the other part circled around him a few times before landing in another direction. It landed in the body of a pale-faced young man in the crowd, causing his body to tremble and his power to show signs of rising. That young man was Yamu. When she saw the old woman's death, Wan Xiao trembled, and the light in her eyes faded away. The third chapter is here, coughing up blood for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 422. The Man and the Dragon came, and when they left, they brought Wan Xiao with them. Besides his great power, there was also a domineering air about the red-haired Su Ming that he did not possess. That domineering air caused him to remain silent as he left, but at the same time, Wan Xiao, who was by his side, also felt respect towards him. When dawn faded away, the red-haired Su Ming stood in the depths of a mountain far away from Autumn Sea tribe. The blood dragons circled in the sky, and when Su Ming cast that secret art, it would protect the area. Wan Xiao stood behind Su Ming and looked at the red-haired man before her with a complicated expression. Besides their faces being somewhat similar, this person was completely different from the Su Ming in her memories. I want to use you to cast a secret art. You don't have to do it willingly, but if you control yourself and do it willingly, then you'll suffer less. Once the red-haired Su Ming finished speaking, he turned around and his gaze fell on Wan Xiao. Wan Xiao remained silent for a moment before she bit her lip and asked in a low voice, Are you Su Ming? Yes. As Su Ming spoke, he lifted his right hand and swung it. Immediately, a layer of red fog appeared and enveloped Wan Xiao within it. Then, he took a step forward and stepped into the fog. Time trickled by, and the sky gradually brightened. When noon arrived, sunlight shone on the ground with heat, but the depths of the mountain where the blood dragon was circling was filled with a chilling air. As it crashed into the heat waves around it, distortions appeared in the air. When the afternoon sun became weaker and the entire afternoon passed by, the red glow of the setting sun gradually faded away. The red fog at the top of the mountain gradually became thinner. When night fell and moonlight shone gently on the ground, the fog at the top of the mountain completely disappeared. The red-haired Su Ming walked out from within. His lips were no longer purple, but had returned to the color of flesh. However, his long hair was now an even more enchanting shade of bright red. His red robes made him look slightly different. Di Tian, Su Ming mumbled. He stood on the mountain and spread his divine sense outwards. This time, his divine sense was even greater than the previous day. Once it covered the area, Su Ming closed his eyes. After a moment, he opened his eyes and looked towards the south. I don't know where this place is, and there's no need for me to know. I only need to know where I can leave and head to the land of immortals. There's a large amount of immortals' presence in a mountain in the east. I can return to the land of immortals there. Su Ming looked toward the south and took a step forward. Immediately, the blood dragon moved as if it wanted to follow him. Recognize her as your master. You were originally one of the dragon veins of this land. I used my divine sense to form a body and gave you intelligence. Now that I'm leaving, you can stay here and become her guardian beast." Su Ming did not turn his head back. As he took a step forward, his body gradually became transparent and he disappeared in midair. The blood dragon seemed to be momentarily stunned. It paced about in midair for a moment before letting out a roar filled with reluctance to part. It was reluctant to part with its master, whom it had only been with for 2 days. In its memory, it was an illusion created by its master. As the blood dragon let out a reluctant roar, Wan Xiu opened her eyes on Mountain. She looked in the direction Su Ming had left, and when she heard his words, she fell silent. Her clothes were still intact, and she even felt as if she had only slept for a while, as if she had just had a dream. Her expression was incredibly complicated. At that moment, she had an indescribable feeling towards Su Ming. It should be hatred, but she could not find a deep hatred. It should be confusion, but she could not find the source of it. This complicated feeling stunned Wan Xiu for a long time before she stood up in exhaustion and walked down the mountain in a daze. The blood dragon still followed behind her, carrying out Su Ming's will. This was the 3rd day. Su Ming knew that he did not have much time left. He could feel the signs that he was about to fall asleep once again, but he still had not killed Dion. He could not accept the fact that he had woken up after much difficulty, just wasting it like this. He walked in the sky, and his target was a mountain that could not be seen with the naked eye, but could be detected with his divine sense. It was a mountain located in the south of the land. There was a thick presence of immortals in that mountain, and it was also the place with the highest number of cracks in the air Su Ming could see with his divine sense. He was certain that he could return to the land of immortals there, and once he did so, he would be able to use the shortest amount of time possible to find Dion and fight against him once again. It's a pity that this woman only fulfills part of the requirements for the secret art. She can't make it perfect. Su Ming shook his head. This was already the most suitable woman he had found. As he moved forward, he got closer to the mountain he could not see. The killing intent in his eyes gradually grew stronger, and his long red hair and red robes caused him to look as if he had swept up a sea of blood as he swiftly closed in on the mountain. However, as Su Ming continued charging forward, his footsteps suddenly came to a halt, and his body appeared in the sea of blood. He stared at the calm air before him, and a freezing glare shone in his eyes. At the same time, the air in the direction he was looking at distorted, and 2 people walked out. They were a man and a woman, and one of them was an old man and a young man. The old man was dressed in a Taoist robe, and when he appeared, his expression was grave as he stared at Su Ming with bright eyes. The woman beside him had a head of long hair, and she was the female immortal Su Ming had once faced in the battlefield in Sky Mist City. The instant she saw Su Ming's face, the woman's eyes went wide and her breathing quickened. Disbelief appeared on her face. "Sir, may I know which clan you came from? I am Hidden Dragon Sex by Air Yuan. Get lost." The red-haired Su Ming said coldly and cut off the old man's words. He walked forward. His time was limited, and he did not want to waste it in this place. The old man's face darkened. He stared at Su Ming, but he did not attack. When he faced Su Ming, a strong sense of danger rose in his heart, and this sense of danger was something he rarely felt ever since he came to the land of berserkers. "Ha, fellow Taoist, do you have something urgent to do? If that's the case, then I won't bother you anymore." The old man had lived for many years, and he could already adapt to circumstances. If he did not have absolute confidence, he would not attack so easily. Even if he had received orders to come here, and even if he had brought the woman with him, just in case he needed to release the suppression on his own power, she could still delay him. Besides, he could tell that there was only one place that could attract Su Ming's attention, and that was the descending mountain. When the old man thought of the powerful berserkers from his sect on the descending mountain, the old man took a few steps back and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow to him with a smile. When the old man moved back, Su Ming walked past him. At the instant, it seemed as if there was no need for them to attack each other. The long-haired woman suddenly spoke up with a pale face. "He's destiny. He's going back to the land of immortals." The instant the word destiny tumbled out of the woman's mouth, the red-haired Su Ming's footsteps came to an abrupt halt. At the same time, the old man was also momentarily stunned before his expression changed drastically. "What did you say? I've seen destiny before. He's destiny." A complicated and terrified look appeared on the long-haired woman's face, and as she spoke, she started retreating. Su Ming frowned and took a swift step forward, but the instant he did so, the old man let out a low growl behind him. "Fellow Taoist, stop!" The old man's white hair danced in the air, and a powerful pressure erupted from his body. The instant Su Ming turned around and looked at him coldly, the old man formed a seal with his hand and pointed at the sky. Immediately, the wind and clouds in the sky tumbled about, and a gigantic runic symbol appeared in the sky. That runic symbol shone with a golden light and charged towards Su Ming with a howl. At the same time, the old man waved his arm, and a large amount of runic symbols appeared around Su Ming. Those runic symbols shone with a strange light and started spinning rapidly around Su Ming. "Cover the berserker sky for me. I want to break the seal and make him stay here for a while. Once I break the seal, our fellow sect members will immediately notice it, and we'll come together to kill this person." The old man's anxious voice traveled into the long-haired woman's ears. The long-haired woman's face was pale. As she retreated, a complicated look appeared in her eyes as she looked at Su Ming. She originally did not want to speak just now, but after a moment of hesitation, she remembered the terrifying disaster that would fall upon the land of immortals once destiny returned, and chose to reveal his identity. As she retreated, she brought out a small white bottle from her bosom, and with a complicated look on her face, she poured out a drop of blood from within. Once that drop of blood was taken out, she formed a seal with her hands, opened her mouth, and sucked in that drop of blood. That drop of blood was instantly sucked in her mouth, and the woman's eyes immediately became even more profound. She lifted her hands and pointed at the sky. Immediately, the sky darkened, as if it was shrouded by a barrier. The old man's hair was moving without wind at that moment. His presence continued becoming stronger, and in an instant, he surpassed the ultimate shaman realm and reached an unknown state. Yet even so, he was still incredibly wary of Su Ming. Once the seals suppressing the old man's power were broken layer by layer, distortions appeared beyond the invisible barrier in the sky. Lightning swam about in those distortions, and the air seemed to tumble about like fog. It was as if something was about to appear in the air. A powerful pressure enveloped the heavens and earth, rapidly spreading in all directions. "Since you're asking for death, then I'll fulfill your wish," the red-haired Su Ming said coldly. Once he swept his gaze past the old man whose presence had increased exponentially, his eyes fell on the long-haired woman. "As for you, you fulfill my requirements. You can help me recover a little more of my power." As Su Ming spoke, a hint of a cruel smile appeared on his lips. That smile was enchanting, and when it fell into the old man's eyes, it made his heart let out a thump. When it fell into the long-haired woman's eyes, she seemed to have remembered something, and a hint of absent-mindedness appeared on her face. At the same time that intense change occurred in the land, a middle-aged man wearing an emperor's robe and a crown walked out from the air above Sky Mist City, which was the border between the land of the shamans and the land of the berserkers. His face was expressionless, and his eyes were aloof. Once he appeared, he did not look at the land beneath him. Instead, he took a step towards the land of the shamans, and in an instant his body became indistinct and he disappeared. "I need monthly votes. I long to get to the first place. Even if the distance between us is getting further and further away, my passion and my heart will never change. I will not give up until the very last moment. I will not give up and fight for the first place. I will fight for the first place. I'll continue tomorrow. I want monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 423. Su Ming's seal shattered, and once he woke up, he erupted with power. He wanted to kill Di Tian and return to the land of immortals. Jin wanted monthly votes so that he could get first place. His state of mind was the same, and his desire was the same. He wanted monthly votes so that he could help Jin get first place. He would continue exploding with power tomorrow, and the plot would continue. He wanted monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 424. The red-haired Su Ming smiled coldly as he looked at the old man. His presence continued growing stronger, and he turned a blind eye to the numerous runic symbols that appeared around him and the gigantic golden runic symbol that was charging towards him from the sky. He was completely unbothered by them. Hidden Dragon's 6th Tao, fire in sleeves. Ever since the old man heard the word destiny, his expression had turned incredibly grave, and there was even a hint of nervousness on his face. At that moment, as he spread his arms out, his hair moved without wind, his robes fluttered, and most of his power was revealed within the invisible barrier formed by the long-haired woman's sky, a berserker's art, with a drop of blood in the bottle. The moment he attacked, he executed Hidden Dragon Sek's greatest divine ability. The instant the words fire and sleeves fell out of his mouth, the old man lifted his arm, and his face instantly turned red. He pursed his lips, and as if he had gathered a mouthful of true qi, he swung his arm at Su Ming. With this swing, thunderous rumbles echoed in the space before the old man. The space there seemed to be on fire, and a sea of fire appeared. This sea of fire continued to spread, and in the blink of an eye, it covered the entire area. At that moment, the mouthful of true qi contained in the old man's tightly shut lips finally opened his mouth and exhaled. With it, a violent gust of wind howled, and as it swept through the area, it gathered together the sea of fire that had covered the entire area, and as it scattered in all directions, it charged straight towards Su Ming. From the distance, it looked as if the sky was burning, and a sea of fire that wanted to devour Su Ming was stirred up. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and in the blink of an eye, the sea of fire enveloped Su Ming. It was also at that moment that the golden runic symbol in the sky and the runic symbols around Su Ming charged towards him together with the sea of fire to kill him. Booming sounds shook the sky and earth. The red-haired Su Ming stood there with a cold sneer on his lips. He did not move at all, simply allowing the runic symbols around him to imprint themselves on his body, allowing the gigantic golden runic symbol in the sky to seal his head with a bang, and allowing the sea of fire from all directions to submerge him in flames with his body as the center. The divine ability struck Su Ming, but not only did the old man not show any joy, he instead widened his eyes as if his eyeballs were about to fall out of their sockets. He sucked in a sharp breath, and disbelief appeared on his face. During the span of a few breaths, the sea of fire that had enveloped Su Ming shrank swiftly from its vast and ostentatious presence. Eventually, it completely disappeared, and Su Ming continued standing there. He only opened his mouth and sucked in a breath. The sea of fire that filled his body was completely sucked into his mouth, as if his body was a bottomless pit. At the same time the sea of fire disappeared, the golden runic symbols on Su Ming's body became dull, and eventually they disappeared from his skin as if they were melting. The gigantic golden seal mark on his head was also rapidly fading away, eventually turning into a wisp of golden aura that seeped into the top of Su Ming's skull and disappeared. Too weak. I'll give you 2 more chances to attack. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever. A hint of derision flashed briefly in his eyes as he laughed coldly. The old man's expression kept changing. He stared at Su Ming and groaned in his heart. He might have heard a thing or two about Destiny's rumors, but he did not expect him to be so terrifying. He believed that his hiding fire and sleeves art was enough to fight against a berserker in the berserker soul realm, but this destiny before him could not even injure him in the slightest. Damn it! How could he be destiny? Or else I wouldn't have to risk my life to keep him here. Now that the celestial phenomenon has appeared, the other people in the sect should be here soon. The old man's eyes sparkled, and the thought of retreating rose in his heart. Yet at that moment, Su Ming's smile turned even colder. If you don't attack within 3 breaths, then you'll have to suffer my divine ability. As Su Ming spoke, he lifted his right hand and curled his fingers into a fist before unfurling them. Once he straightened his palm, he pushed forward through the air. That one push immediately caused the ground underneath to tremble. Cracks suddenly appeared on the ground, and at the same time, a vast amount of earthen aura rose from the ground with a bang from all directions. That earthen aura was like a wave of air that sealed up a circular area of 5,000 lis like a cage. From the distance, no one could be seen in that place. All they could see was a murky wall of earthen aura that was connected to the sky from all directions. This sort of divine ability, this sort of art that could stir up earthen aura, made the old man's pupils shrink. He instinctively took a few steps back with shock in his eyes. Sweat broke out on his forehead, and as he groaned in his heart, he also started hating the long-haired woman whose face was also pale. If that woman had not insisted on revealing Su Ming's identity, he would not have needed to attack. At that moment, he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. When Su Ming opened his mouth to speak, the old man suddenly remembered what Su Ming had said about the span of 3 breaths. He did not have time to think too much about it. The old man's long hair danced madly in the air, and veins popped up on his face. He lifted his right hand and started forming seals before him. He was so quick that in the blink of an eye, he turned into an endless amount of afterimages that flashed before him, as if they were connected together. The veins on the old man's face started twisting and moving as he formed those seals, turning into a king's mark that looked like a tiger's stripe on the old man's face. An incredibly powerful presence erupted forth from his body. That presence was so strong that it caused the wind and clouds in the sky above the land of the shamans beyond the invisible screen of light the long-haired woman had created with her art. Muffled whistles seemed to travel out from the murky sky. Soon after, a bolt of lightning flashed through the murky and dark sky, and a gigantic crack appeared. As it did so, an indescribable pressure spread out from the crack and descended on the land of the shamans. The moment the crack appeared, Su Ming lifted his head swiftly and stared at it. A rarely seen serious look appeared on his face. As for the old man, he was terrified. Once he cast a glance at the crack above him, he gritted his teeth and continued forming the seals in his hands, just as he was about to cast his divine ability. As for the long-haired woman, there was a layer of blood-red light surrounding her body. That blood-red light seeped out of her body. It might not seem bright, but it had an incredibly powerful defensive effect. As the person chosen to help the people of the sect conceal the berserker's sky, her safety was usually the most important factor in a battle of arts. Yet at that moment, her face was pale, and a trickle of blood trickled down the corner of her mouth. Clearly, she could not maintain the art to conceal the berserker's sky for much longer. More importantly, there was something off about her expression at that moment. She was not looking at the old man, but was still looking at Su Ming. The complicated look in her eyes would occasionally turn into a daze, causing her to not know whether she had done the right thing in revealing his identity. She would never forget how she, when she was just an outer disciple of Hidden Dragon sect, had entered a group that was given a mysterious mission due to a selection. There were nearly 100 women in that group, including her. At that time, she was very timid and was only at the 6th level of the Chi refinement realm. She was also very weak, and she did not want to practice immortal cultivation. She only wanted to return home and accompany her parents. Becoming an outer disciple of Hidden Dragon sect was not her original intention either. It was because she was the only one in her family who possessed the constitution to practice immortal cultivation. To ensure that the fate of cultivation in her family would continue to be passed down, she had no choice but to join Hidden Dragon's sect. Once she joined that group, she and her sisters from the same sect were sent to a strange place. Over there, only 7 out of 100-something people remained. The others were not chosen, and she was one of the 7. She lived in that strange place for a total of 360 cycles. The long-haired woman bit her lip. There was a dazed look in her eyes as she stared at Su Ming blankly, as if she had forgotten everything. At that moment, as the crack in the sky appeared and as that terrifying pressure descended, the old man continued forming seals with his right hand, then lifted it abruptly and pointed at Su Ming. Hidden Dragon's third Tao, Crouching Tiger. With it, the king's mark on his face distorted, and an illusory image appeared on his face to turn into a tiger's head. When the tiger's head charged out with a roar, a body for limbs, and a complete body appeared. It turned into a semi-transparent tiger, and when it rushed out, its body grew in the face of the wind until it was several hundreds of feet big. It roared at Su Ming. Hidden Dragon, third Tao, Hidden Dragon. Clouds and fog appeared in a circular area of 5,000 lis, as if the area had turned into a sea of clouds. As the sea of clouds tumbled about, a body that looked like a python would occasionally appear. It was as if there was a gigantic python swimming about in the fog. Almost the instant the tiger pounced on Su Ming, a gigantic head appeared from the clouds and fog behind him. A foul stench swept through the area, and 2 long whiskers swayed in the air. That was not a python, but a ferocious dragon head. Only the dragon's head was revealed. Most of its body was hidden in the clouds and fog. Once it appeared, it let out a dragon roar and charged toward Su Ming. Before him was the semi-transparent tiger, and behind him was the raging dragon hidden in the clouds and fog. Su Ming stood in the middle, and a strange light appeared in his eyes. He did not dodge, but instead turned his body sideways and lifted his left hand to seize the tiger pouncing on him. He pressed 2 fingers together on his right hand and pointed toward the raging dragon behind him. Red sieve phenomenon, rotation of the universe, Su Ming said languidly. The instant he spoke, his voice was drowned out by the tiger's roar and the dragon's roar. He turned his left hand into a claw and pressed it against the incoming tiger's head. The instant he did so, a ghastly smile appeared on Su Ming's lips. No one knew what sort of method he used, but with a swing of his left arm, a wave of power seemed to be sucked out from the tiger's body. It was absorbed into his body through his left arm before it was sent to his right arm. Immediately, the 2 fingers on Su Ming's right hand, along with his entire arm, turned into a tiger that was exactly the same as the tiger before him. From a distance, the tiger before Su Ming did not change. Once his right hand turned into the tiger, it crashed into the raging dragon charging towards him from behind. Yet at that moment, the same thing happened. Su Ming's left hand, which was pressed against the tiger's head, twisted and turned into a raging dragon. This scene made it seem as if a raging dragon had charged out of Su Ming's body to fight against the tiger. The dragon and the tiger fought, and the tiger and dragon killed each other in midair as they clashed against the dragon and tiger formed by the old man's divine ability. I'm sending the first update. I don't have any other requests, just that I have more monthly votes than yesterday. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 425. I vaguely remember that Hidden Dragon sect has an ancient art passed down from ancient times. It's called Hidden Execution of Justice. Do you know this style? Booming sounds shook the sky and earth. As they reverberated in the air, the old man coughed out a mouthful of blood and staggered a few steps back. At that moment, Su Ming's calm voice reached his ears. At the spot where the dragon and tiger fought against each other, the raging dragon crumbled and the tiger let out a piercing roar. Once they disappeared, Su Ming walked out slowly from within. His expression remained the same. Not a single hint of change could be detected on his face. He stood there and looked at the old man coldly. You still have one more chance. As long as you can cast this style and let me witness Hidden Dragon sect's ancient art, I won't kill you. Are you serious? The old man's face turned pale. With slight terror, he could tell that this destiny before him clearly knew that he was stalling for time, but he did not mind it in the slightest. Besides, through the two divine abilities they had clashed against each other previously, the old man had discovered, to his shock, that destiny's strength had surpassed his imagination. He could not understand why the crack that appeared in the sky of the land of berserkers had only locked onto him and did not affect Su Ming in the slightest when he executed his power. At that moment, he was filled with extreme regret. As he faced Su Ming, who had not retaliated even a single bit, he felt a deep sense of fear. When he heard Su Ming's words, he fell silent for a moment before he gritted his teeth and spoke. Su Ming frowned and said languidly, "You can only believe it." The old man's expression changed repeatedly. He had already spread his divine sense outwards previously and knew that the area around him had been sealed. The power of that seal was so strong that it was impossible for him to escape. At that moment, he simply did not have any other choice. It did not matter whether Su Ming's words were true or false. He only had one choice, and after a moment, he gritted his teeth. "With your power, you won't lower yourself to deceive me. Since you want to see it, I will cast this art once, but it's difficult for me to fully cast the hidden execution of justice with my current level of cultivation. I can only push it slightly." As the old man spoke, he lifted his hands and tapped a few spots on his chest. Immediately, a healthy shade of red appeared on his face. He formed a seal with his right hand and pointed forward. "Hidden Dragon Tao 6, Hidden Fire in Sleeves." The old man swung his arm, and the seal on his right hand changed before he tapped his right eye. Immediately, a yellow light appeared in his right eye. As that light shone, the mark of a ball of fire appeared in his pupil. In fact, at the instant the mark of fire appeared, some of the flames stirred up in the old man's sleeve, and they were absorbed by his right eye. "Hidden Dragon Third Path, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon." The seal in the old man's right hand changed again, and a large amount of afterimages of seals appeared before him. Fog surrounded him, and there seemed to be dragons swimming within it. Veins popped up on his face, and the tiger stripes reappeared. Yellow light shone in his right eye, and the veins on the old man's face swam about, as if they were absorbed into his right eye. At the same time, a large amount of blood capillaries appeared in the old man's right eye. At the instant those blood capillaries formed the word king, the fog around him tumbled back and was absorbed into his right eye. Then, a dragon swimming and roaring appeared in the old man's right pupil. "Hidden Dragon Tao 9, Autumn Harvest and Winter Hide." The old man shuddered, and as he gritted his teeth, blood trickled out of the corners of his lips. He formed a seal with his left hand and pointed forward once again. "Hidden Dragon Tao 8, Retreat and Hide in Secret." "Hidden Dragon Tao 7, Hide and Hide." "Hidden Dragon Tao 2, Hide." Ruasu. The old man executed a large number of divine abilities in one go, and the moment they appeared, they were immediately absorbed by his right eye. At that moment, after casting 6 divine abilities, the old man's right eye looked murky at first glance, but if anyone took a closer look, they would find that it seemed to be divided into yin and yang, and there was a vague picture of an 8 trigrams. It was also at that moment that the mighty pressure spreading out from the gigantic crack in the sky became even stronger. With a buzzing sound, an item slowly descended from the crack. That item was a long, bronze-colored halberd. There was an arc at the tip of the halberd, and at the same time it exuded a ghastly chill. The entire sky instantly darkened as it descended. The clouds disappeared, and cracks appeared in the air, as if the world could not withstand the descent of the halberd and was about to crumble. A powerful divine sense spread out with a bang from the halberd and instantly enveloped the entire area. The halberd turned around slowly, as if it was searching for something. Almost the instant the halberd appeared, all the clouds in the sky of the entire land of South Morning tumbled about, and a strange whistling sound rang through the sky with a buzzing sound. In the land of the berserkers was the old man from the great tribe of Freezing Sky Tribe. A hint of a seal appeared in his eyes as he stared at the sky. Within the 6th gate of Heaven Gate in Freezing Sky Clan was an incredibly handsome middle-aged man. He was talking to 8 Heaven Gate disciples before him with a smile on his face. Occasionally, his laughter would echo in the air and the Heaven Gate disciples would also laugh respectfully by his side. They looked incredibly harmonious, but suddenly the clouds in the sky tumbled about, and strange whistling sounds reverberated in the air. The middle-aged man's expression changed, and his smile disappeared. He lifted his head, and his pupils shrank as he stared at the sky. There was a clear hint of nervousness in his pupils. Within Western Sea Clan was an illusion created by the powerful warriors of the clan. It was an ocean floating in the sky, and there were plenty of islands there. These islands were on the ocean, but the ocean was in the sky. It looked like a mirage, and it was filled with a visual impact. At that moment, there was an old man with the body of an ape on one of the islands in the sea. He wore a straw hat and had a fishbone dangling from the corner of his mouth. He held a fishing rod in his hand and leaned against a big rock. He was fishing leisurely at a cliff that was beneath the ocean, and he would occasionally hum a tune, looking incredibly relaxed. But soon, he swallowed the fish bone in one gulp and looked towards the sky with a dark expression. After some time, he stood up, as if he was deep in thought. After a moment, he let out a long sigh and shook his head with a wry smile before continuing to crouch down and fish. However, from the complicated look in his eyes, it could be seen that he was no longer in the mood to fish. The three people in the underground palace in Sky Mist City, including Sky Mist's ancestor, lifted their heads at the same time. A cold sneer appeared at the corners of Sky Mist's ancestor's lips. As for the other two, shock appeared on their faces. This is the result of revealing the power of the immortals. Do you understand now, fellow Taoist? Sky Mist's ancestor asked languidly. The same scene appeared in several spots in the land of the shamans. As the strange phenomenon in the sky appeared, the immortals were not the only ones who sensed it in the land of South Morning. Some of the powerful shamans and berserkers of the older generation also noticed this strange change, and each of them had their own thoughts. The long-haired woman's face was pale as she stood beneath the halberd. At that moment, she was looking at the halberd beyond the barrier, and panic appeared in her eyes. She saw the invisible barrier immediately shining with a red light once the halberd appeared. That red light seemed to have hidden itself within the halberd's divine sense. And even if the halberd turned around and swept through the land and the sky with its divine sense, it looked as if it could not see the immortals who had appeared beneath it. The old man was incredibly nervous. In his terror, he formed a seal with his right hand, and once he tapped his right eye, he looked towards Su Ming. The old man's body was revealed in the air, and at the same time he coughed up blood. Madness appeared in his eyes. He no longer tried to dodge, but chose to self-destruct in a fit of madness. He knew that he was definitely going to die, but the grudge he felt before he died made him not hesitate to self-destruct. With a bang, the old man's body exploded, but the halberd did not seem to be bothered by it. It touched the ground once again, and the old man's body was strangely frozen in midair. It was as if time had stopped, and he could not continue collapsing. Instead, when the halberd touched him, he melted, and in the blink of an eye, he turned into a puddle of blood that spilled onto the ground. Second chapter. Ask for monthly votes again. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 426. Once the old man died, the bronze halberd slowly turned around and spread its divine sense outwards. With the old man as its center, it spread out in all directions with a bang. The light that spread out instantly covered Sky Mist City, and in the span of a breath, it spread to the four corners of South Morning, the South Morning, the East Morning, the North Morning, and the West Morning. It covered the entire land of South Morning. At that moment, almost all the outsiders in the land of South Morning, no matter what level of cultivation they had, felt their hearts tremble. Even the old man from the great tribe of Freezing Sky was the same. So what if the immortals were strong? At that moment, when the halberd descended, they did not dare reveal even a hint of their presence. The terror and nervousness in their eyes were enough to prove just how powerful the person who left behind the halberd had been. It was enough to prove that the outsiders in the land of the berserkers were still outsiders. The halberd moved forward slowly in the sky. Once the divine sense spread out, a buzzing sound suddenly came from the halberd. That buzzing sound instantly traveled through the distance and reverberated through the entire sky of South Morning. That sound was like a provocation. It was as if it was provoking all the immortals hidden in the land of South Morning to see which of them would dare to reveal their presence. So powerful, there were 4 old men standing on the plains beyond the immortals' descending mountain, which the shamans could not see with the naked eye. Their faces were pale, and they lifted their heads to look at the sky with fear on their faces. Once they noticed the abnormality in the sky, they immediately moved, but when they reached this place, they had to descend and did not dare continue flying. This is the Berserker tribe, the terrifying, mysterious berserkers. No wonder the sect master desires the berserkers so much and repeatedly told us not to release too much of the immortals' presence. If we really want to release it, we must have a celestial maiden by our side to cover the berserker's sky. This is the 3rd time I've seen it appear. You've all descended later. I've seen it twice before, and each time, it was a fellow Taoist who did not believe in the mysteries of this place and brought forth a disaster of death. Under Sky Mist City, even the old man from Sky Mist City was nervous. The other 2 people's faces were pale. They withdrew all their presence with shock and terror in their eyes. The berserkers actually have such a powerful vessel. The power of one strike from that vessel is equivalent to the peak of the 2nd step. Even the sect master and the others would find it difficult to escape from that vessel. This magic treasure is simply heaven-defying. Just what kind of land is this? It's just an artifact, but it has such heaven-defying power. The Berserker tribe is weak, and the Shaman tribe is even more insignificant. But why would such a weak world have such a treasure? Could this be the reason why the sect master and the sect elders value the land of the berserkers so much? This place is simply too terrifying. I can't imagine how the weak berserkers could possibly have this sort of enchanted treasure that shouldn't even exist in this world plane. Moreover, this magic treasure clearly has a spiritual consciousness. Who left it behind? Who does it belong to? Could it be the first god of berserkers? That is the first god of berserkers who enslaved us and caused 7/10 of us to die. During that period of time, if the powerful immortals wanted to create their own sects, they would have to come to the land of berserkers and worship him before they could do so. Fellow Taoist Tianlan, if this item exists in the land of South Morning, then does that mean that the other lands of the berserkers also have this sort of enchanted treasure? Due to the appearance of the halberd, the people in the underground palace felt their hearts tremble. After a long while, Sky Mist's ancestor spoke in a low voice. The other 3 continents also have these so-called berserkers' sacred vessels, but compared to them, the truly terrifying one is the berserkers' sacred vessel in the Great Ute Dynasty, the Great Barren Cauldron. You can imagine just how powerful it is if this item is known as the berserkers' sacred vessel. Besides the people in Sky Mist City's underground palace, all the immortals in the land of the berserkers fell silent as the long halberd let out a provocative buzzing sound. They did not dare let out even a hint of their presence as immortals. In the face of the berserkers' sacred vessel that could kill them in one hit, all of them would feel fear rise in their hearts. This sort of powerful enchanted treasure was an incredibly rare item even among the immortals. The difficulty of subduing this sort of enchanted treasure was so great that it was practically impossible. At that moment, the buzzing sound reverberated in the sky. All the immortals in the land of South Morning were silent, except for a middle-aged man wearing an emperor's robe and a crown walking towards them from the direction of Sky Mist City. That person's face was expressionless. Not a single hint of the presence of an immortal could be sensed from his body, and he did not have any intelligence. He only had his instincts, and since he did not have any intelligence, he was not bothered by the provocative buzzing sound or the pressure in the sky. Since he only had his instincts, That was why as he walked, his presence as an immortal was not obvious. There was something on his body, and when the halberd's divine sense swept past him, it turned a blind eye to him, as if there was a barrier above the dead old man. Once the halberd floated for a distance in the sky, it no longer let out those buzzing sounds of provocation. It returned to the crack in the sky and slowly disappeared into it. Then, the crack closed up, the pressure disappeared, and the world returned to normal. Yet, even so, the immortals in the land of South Morning were still terrified, and for a long period of time after that, most of them became incredibly cautious in their actions. Su Ming lifted his head and continued looking at the halberd. Even when it disappeared, there was a strange glint in his eyes that eventually turned into a sigh filled with regret. It's a pity that item isn't something I can subdue, or else. The red-haired Su Ming shook his head and turned around to look at the long-haired woman by his side. Right from the start, the woman had not revealed too much of her presence as an immortal. When she cast the art to hide the berserker sky, she had mostly relied on the blood in the bottle. That was why even though the halberd had appeared and killed the old man, it still ignored her. At that moment, she was also looking at Su Ming. Her petite body trembled in midair, and once she met his gaze, she averted it. With an aloof expression, Su Ming walked towards the woman. The long-haired woman's face turned pale, and she took a few steps back. But as if she had made a decision in her heart, she stopped retreating and lifted her head stubbornly to look at Su Ming. Su Ming walked towards the woman, and once he swept his gaze across her body, he lifted his right index finger and tapped the center of the woman's brows with his fingernail. After a long while, Su Ming lifted his finger. "I should have killed you, but since you fulfill my requirements, I'll spare your life," the red-haired Su Ming said languidly. With a wave of his arm, a gust of red wind immediately appeared out of nowhere and swept up the long-haired woman along with Su Ming, charging towards the horizon. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. There was an incredibly famous forest in the land of the shamans, several hundreds of thousands of leagues away from the descending mountain that could not be seen with the naked eye. That forest was famous because of its beauty. It was a fiery red forest, and there was something unique about the red maple leaves. No matter what season it was, this place would always be covered in fiery red leaves. From the distance, the red leaves on the mountain swayed in the wind, looking like burning flames. At that moment, there was wind blowing past the red leaves on the mountain, and they let out rustling sounds. There was a slight chill in the air, and some of the leaves curled up in the wind and danced in the air. There were also fallen leaves all over the ground. Most of them were still red, and only a few of them had withered faces. They covered the ground, causing all those who walked on them to feel as if they were walking on fire. The red-haired Su Ming had brought the long-haired woman to this place 2 hours ago. As the wind and the rustling sounds of the leaves filled the area, the leaves in the area were like red fog. They circled around them and turned into a gigantic ball of maple leaves that existed quietly at the center of the forest. When the sun set in the horizon and the light of dusk dyed the fiery red in the area with gold, it gave the place a different kind of beauty. At that moment, the ball of maple leaves in the forest slowly spread out. As it spread out and the leaves fell on the ground, Su Ming walked out from within. His hair seemed to have fused together with the maple leaves in the area. Even if there were leaves that fell on his head, it would be hard to tell them apart at first glance. It was the same for his red robes. He, who walked out of the maple leaves, looked as if he had been born in the fiery red forest. His face was no longer pale, but was now rosy. His lips had already returned to their normal color, but the mark of the peach blossom at the center of his brows had become even brighter. Behind Su Ming was a woman sitting cross-legged on the falling maple leaves. Her long hair spilled over her shoulders, and at that moment, she had her eyes wide open as she looked at Su Ming leaving into the distance. The complicated look in her eyes became stronger. Her clothes were still intact, but her face had become much paler. "I've been waiting for this day. I wasn't even sure myself. I wanted to take a look at destiny in this place. You are him, but only a part of him. You still haven't woken up." She mumbled softly. There was a dazed look on her face, and she felt as if she had returned to a time 60 years ago. At that time, she was just a timid, weak girl who came from a small family and possessed the potential to become an immortal. Under the guidance of the people in the sect, she and 100-something fellow sect members came to that place, and there she saw a person. As the long-haired woman remained in a daze, the red-haired Su Ming walked further into the distance. Gradually, he walked out of the fiery red forest and into the dusk sky. There was wind behind him, and that wind brought with it a few maple leaves. It was beautiful, very beautiful. It did not matter whether it was Wan Xiao or the long-haired woman. The red-haired Su Ming did not truly touch their bodies. The art of Yin Wan subject to the dragon only required Yin aura. In fact, he had killed very few people along the way. He did not think that there was anything abnormal about this, but if the old man from the great tribe of Freezing Sky knew about this, he would definitely find some clues that would terrify him. In fact, once he found out about this, he would think of a way to notify his master at all costs. The third chapter. Honestly, I felt really bad today. One of them is an author who is the same age as me in the same city as me. Once I read it, I felt really sentimental. The other one is that I got a little heat stroke when I went out today. Writing isn't easy. Really, this isn't the first time I've felt this. I'm not complaining to all of you. If there's a reward, then there must be a price to pay. This is a trade. I'm just feeling a little sentimental about whether it's worth it or not. Every single day, I write for 10 hours. Brain, stamina, tobacco. Let's not talk about it. I'll continue writing the fourth chapter. If you still have a monthly vote, please vote for me. Thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 427. The red-haired Su Ming walked in midair and looked in the direction of the mountain where the immortals would descend. He took a deep breath, and a red glare shone in his eyes. Tian, I'm coming. He took a step forward, and the instant his foot landed, his body started distorting. In the blink of an eye, that distorted body gradually disappeared. Not even 3 breaths after Su Ming disappeared, suddenly, ripples appeared in the air at that spot. A middle-aged man dressed in an emperor's robe and crown walked out of those ripples. His face was still expressionless. He cast a glance at the spot where Su Ming had left, then took a step forward and disappeared once again. There was a mountain in the land of the shamans. That mountain could not be seen with the naked eye. Even if a person stood right before it, they would not be able to see its existence. In fact, if they crashed into it, not a single ripple would be stirred up. Their bodies would pass through the mountain as if it was empty air. That mountain was where the mysterious god of Shaman's temple was located in the land of the shamans. It was also the place where the immortals would choose to descend upon the land of the shamans every single time they descended. When Su Ming walked out of the air, there was a long river beneath him. The water flowed rapidly, and the sounds of water splashing could be heard. If anyone looked from the sky, the river would not seem too wide, but if they looked to the other side from ashore, they would find that the river was several tens of thousands of feet wide. The water was not clear, but rather murky. It was impossible to see just how deep it was. If anyone stretched their hand into the river and scooped it up, then they would find a lot of black sand in their hands. Su Ming stood there and closed his eyes. As he spread his divine sense outwards, he saw a gigantic mountain that towered into the clouds at the center of the long river beneath him. It stood there, causing the river to look as if it had been cut off, but in truth, it was flowing through the mountain. The mountain was entirely black and surrounded by clouds and fog. There were black halls built in some of the corners of the mountain. With just a glance, Su Ming could see that these halls were densely packed together, and he had no idea how many of them there were. A few winding paths were laid out on the mountain. The paths were paved with flagstones, and they formed a stark contrast against the black mountain. Near the top of the mountain, there was a circle around the mountain. There were the most halls there, and some of them were even built against the mountain. It was as if the mountain had been dug out of the mountain to form a hall. Su Ming swept his divine sense through the mountain and eventually gathered it at the top of the mountain. There was a tall tower at the top of the mountain. There were 18 floors to the tower, and its top was not pointed. Instead, it was spread out in the shape of an octagon, as if a person had grown a finger and had lifted their hand to push their palm towards the sky. At the center of the octagonal spire was an altar. It was very flat, and there was a rectangular object in the middle. This object was made of black stone. It was connected to the altar and fused with the tower. It looked like a coffin, or rather, it was a coffin. Occasionally, bolts of black lightning would spread out from the coffin and be absorbed by the 8 corners of the spire. As magnetic sounds rang in the air, they would charge towards the sky, and eventually they would be swallowed by the clouds and fog at the end of the sky. Su Ming could vaguely see that the clouds and fog in the sky were incredibly thick. They floated heavily in the air, but this was only what he could see with his divine sense. If he opened his eyes to look, he would find that there were no clouds or fog in the sky. There were only faint sparks of starlight in the dusk. Su Ming retrieved his divine sense and opened his eyes. He took a step towards the air before him, and at the instant his foot landed, a layer of ripples suddenly appeared in the empty space before him. Those ripples rippled violently, as if they wanted to stop Su Ming from stepping in, but they only lasted for a moment before Su Ming stepped into the ripples and disappeared from the sky above the long river. Almost at the instant Su Ming disappeared, the man in the emperor's robe and crown appeared in the sky above the long river. Without a hint of hesitation, he took a step toward the spot where Su Ming had taken his first step and his actions. When Su Ming appeared, he was still standing in the sky, but there were clouds and fog above his head. Under him was not the gushing long river, but the mountain that could not be seen with the naked eye. At the instant he appeared, the mountain was silent, but Su Ming could hear multiple sounds of breathing, and they were all nervous. He did not bother himself with them. Instead, he turned into a long arc and charged towards the tower at the top of the mountain. Yet at the instant he flew over, ripples appeared once again behind him, and the man with the crown who had been chasing after him took a step forward. Su Ming was still in midair, but his footsteps suddenly came to a halt. He turned his head around and stared at the man in the emperor's robe and crown who had walked out from the air. His pupils shrank, and his red hair danced in the air. Killing intent shone in his eyes. Dition, the red-haired Su Ming's heart trembled. He had spread his divine sense outwards, but he had not discovered anyone following behind him. At that moment, when he saw the face of the person following him clearly, he could not help but be shaken, and in an instant, a monstrous killing intent filled his body. That person was naturally Dition, who he wanted to kill as soon as possible. There was nothing more important to the red-haired Su Ming than a person who he had been longing to kill, all this while suddenly appearing before him. Even if this person was just Dition's projection, compared to going to the land of immortals to search for Dition within a few days and fighting against his projection, Su Ming chose the second option without any hesitation. Even if his rationality would not allow him to make this choice, his entire power erupted forth from his body, causing the world around him to rumble as if it could not withstand the pressure. At that moment, due to Dition's appearance, the red-haired Su Ming did not notice that there was a ray of light shining through the gap between the lid of the coffin on the octagonal altar at the top of the tower, located at the top of the mountain behind him. Dition, who was dressed in the emperor's robe and crown, had an aloof expression on his face. His gaze was merciless, and once he appeared, he did not stop for even a single moment. He simply walked towards the red-haired Su Ming. A shocking presence spread out from his body. That presence made him feel as if he was the ruler of the world, as if wherever he stood was the king's territory. There was no person in the world, no power that could make him stop. The person he wanted to kill had no chance of survival once the words of the monarch were uttered. The person he wanted to kill would similarly be the person the emperor spoke, and the world would obey. Wherever he went, it did not matter whether they were shamans or berserkers. All living beings would tremble because of his presence. It was a domineering presence, an incredibly domineering and awe-inspiring presence. With a lift of my hand, I can mend the flaws in the world. What right do you have to call me by my name? With a wave of my arm, I can bathe the sun and moon. What right do you have to not kneel before me? Tion said flatly. His voice was not loud, but every single word he said sounded like thunder, as if they came from all directions. It was as if the heavens were speaking to him. 11,000 words per chapter. Please give me monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and give me a recommendation vote or a monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 428. Life requires rushing around, and writing requires passion. I don't know how everyone is like, but I think many of you are like me, living an ordinary life in this ordinary world. As an ordinary person, they have their own happiness, anger, sorrow, and joy that are insignificant in the eyes of others. I don't do bad things. I don't harm others to benefit myself. I don't speak too much, and I hope to get something in return after giving. Even if the return isn't much, it's enough to make me grin. In the past, I still had the longing for a pie falling from the sky, but now I have to lower my head, knead the dough step by step, bake it, and finally make my own pie. Just like the explosion of writing, I don't imagine how many votes I'll get. I'll lower my head and write time and time again. You can see it, but if you can't, I can only feel powerless. Votes. Sometimes, do you really need to use the word beg? In fact, the moment the word beg is written, it's already bitter. Just like the ancient emperors, the moment they say forgive, they themselves are guilty. If they're not guilty, how can they be forgiven? If they really know how to vote, why do they have to beg so many times? Today, they can see through it, but tomorrow, they will be helpless and they will still have to run into it. Rather than struggling bitterly, it's better to beg the devil. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 429. In the face of Tion's calm, yet domineering words, his words were like the might of heaven. When he spoke, it was as if the heavens were interrogating him. Tion's clothes and unique crown made him look like an overlord who ruled over an endless number of world planes and the universe's life and death. He was looking down on Su Ming with a supreme might. His voice was not loud, but there was a will within it that allowed no doubt, no rebuttal, and he had to be obeyed. It was as if all the living in the world would tremble once they heard his words and would have to kneel down to worship him. Endless respect and fear would rise in their hearts. Nonsense. In the face of Tion's domineering words, the red-haired Su Ming only had these two words as his answer. Su Ming's hair was fiery red. Crimson light shone in his eyes as he stared at Tion and spoke languidly. What does it have to do with me if you can mend the world's flaws? This mending is just like labor. What's there for you to show off? What does it have to do with me if you can bathe the sun and moon? Do you think that bathing the sun and moon will make you noble as well? But since you enjoy this status, then I'll fulfill it for you. The red-haired Su Ming looked at Tion, who was continuously walking towards him. As he spoke, he lifted his right hand and formed a seal. His index finger touched his thumb, and when he formed a circle, he seized the air in the direction of the ground. That one grab immediately caused the ground to tremble violently. At that moment, Tion lifted two fingers on his right hand and pointed casually at Su Ming. The instant he did so, a jolt ran through Su Ming's body, as if there was an invisible force charging towards him, pushing his body backwards in an instant. He was forced back several thousands of feet, and in an instant, he was forced out of the Shaman Mountain. Su Ming's vision blurred. The mountain disappeared and was replaced by the flowing river on the ground. Everything returned to the scene he saw when he was outside the mountain. Su Ming's face was dark. As he retreated, he formed a seal with both his hands and seized at the ground through the air once again. Veins popped up on his face, and he let out a low growl. At the same time, Tion took a step forward in the air before Su Ming. Clearly, he had also walked out of the area where the Shaman's Mountain was located. His expression remained calm, and not a hint of emotion could be detected on his face. He looked at Su Ming and lifted his right hand once again. This time, he did not use 2 fingers, but 4 fingers to cut down. With that one slash, the sky before Tion suddenly let out cracking sounds, and 4 gigantic cracks appeared in the sky. It was pitch black within those cracks, and a large amount of chilling air spread out from them. The sky could no longer withstand Tion's 4 slashes and started shattering. The 4 cracks were like 4 twisting black dragons that charged towards Su Ming at an incredible speed. At the instant the 4 cracks were less than 100 feet away from Su Ming, he lifted his head swiftly, and the hand he'd been using to seize the ground through the air lifted his head. Pull the earth. A strange light appeared in Su Ming's eyes. The instant he lifted his hands, the ground beneath him started trembling furiously, and cracks rapidly appeared on the ground, causing the long river to look as if it was about to collapse. A large amount of water surged into the cracks, but that was not all. More importantly, as the ground trembled, an overlapping feeling appeared on it. The appearance of that overlapping feeling made it seem as if the soul of the land had left its body and was floating out of it. If anyone looked over, this scene would appear on the ground within a circular area of 10,000 lis. It did not matter whether it was the long river or the plains. The instant the overlapping shadow appeared and Su Ming lifted his hands, they floated up with a bang and appeared before him, turning into a gigantic piece of land. That piece of land stood vertically like a gigantic shield that blocked the 4 cracks. It might be an illusion, but from the distance, the vertical piece of land was a terrifying sight to behold. Due to the loss of its soul, the long river on the ground had dried up. The large amount of cracks on the ground showed signs of shattering. It was as if anyone took a step on the ground, they would sink in. The grass on the plains withered and died, and the entire land exuded an air of defeat. Almost at the instant the land formed by the soul of the earth turned into a shield and stood in front of Su Ming, a loud bang surged into the sky. The 4 cracks crashed into the soul of the earth, turning into a sound that reverberated endlessly and spread in all directions. The 4 cracks might have seemed normal, but in truth, the power contained within them was incredibly shocking. Once they crashed into the land formed by the soul of the earth, 3 of them disappeared, but the last one was imprinted on the soul of the earth, causing the illusory land to continuously move backwards as booming sounds reverberated in the air. It also pushed Su Ming's body back continuously. However, there was no panic on the red-haired Su Ming's face. Instead, he smiled darkly, and 2 words tumbled out of his mouth like thunder. Sky-shattering. The moment those words left his mouth, the illusory land formed by the soul of the earth before Su Ming started tumbling backwards even faster, pushing Su Ming several tens of thousands of feet backwards. Then, a shocking boom rang out behind him. When that boom rang out, it was as if Su Ming's body had crashed into space as he was pushed back by the illusory land. It was as if space was not endless, but had a barrier. As he crashed into it, a huge hole was formed in the sky. The moment that hole appeared, the soul of the earth charged straight in with a howl. As it tore and crumbled, the hole in the sky expanded swiftly until it was nearly 10,000 feet in size. From the distance, the sky looked as if it was leaking. A large amount of freezing air spilled out from the hole and spread towards the ground. An endless suction force spread out from within, causing an endless amount of dust on the ground to immediately fly up and be devoured by the big hole. In fact, the shaman mountain that was originally hidden and could not be seen with the naked eye started distorting at that moment. Clearly, under the suction force, it could only fight against it with great difficulty. With my current level of cultivation, I can't make the sky shatter, but with the power of the earth, I can have the soul of the earth crash into the soul of the sky. Clearly, under the suction force, it could only fight back with great difficulty. For your avatar projection to remain in this unknown world, it must be extremely important to you. Since that's the case, let's see if you want to mend it. The red-haired Su Ming moved and appeared in another direction. He seized the air in the direction of the ground once again, and as the ground rumbled, another illusory land that was formed by the soul of the earth appeared in midair. As Su Ming retreated, he used that land's momentum to crash into the air, causing the air there to let out a tearing sound, and a second gigantic hole that was 10,000 feet in size appeared. As an even stronger suction force spread out, the spot where the Shaman Mountain was hidden started distorting and crumbling, causing the mountain that could not be seen with the naked eye to be revealed on the ground, a rare sight. It was especially so under that suction force. The mountain trembled as if it was about to be pulled out of the ground and sucked into the hole. Without any expression on his face, Di Tian lifted his right hand as he stood in midair. As he formed a seal, he clenched his fist, and the instant he did so, Su Ming's robes immediately fluttered in the wind. His red hair was also swept by a violent gust of wind. He immediately noticed that the power of the world around him was charging towards him at a shocking speed from the distance. This was not the suction force coming from the hole in the sky. Instead, the power of the world was being sucked towards Di Tian as he clenched his fist. The area of the power of the world was so wide that it made Su Ming's pupils shrink. It's just a projection, and it already possesses such power. Damn it, just how many years have passed? I can sense that Di Tian isn't this strong. Just how many years have passed? A dazed look appeared in the red-haired Su Ming's eyes, but he recovered in an instant, and a murderous glint appeared in his eyes. No matter what, if I can't even kill his projection, then how can I even think about killing his real self? Su Ming lifted his right hand swiftly and seized at the air. Immediately, an eyeball covered in blood appeared on his palm. This was the eyeball he had just obtained from the old man from Hidden Dragon Sect, the one that contained the hidden execution of Justice's art. Di Tian clenched his fist and absorbed a large amount of the power of the world towards him. Then, he unfurled his fist and pushed his palm towards the first hole in the sky, causing the power of the world to gather together and surge towards the hole, as if he wanted to mend it. At the same time, Su Ming threw the eyeball in his hand and started forming seals with his hands, continuously sending out seals to fuse into the eyeball. His expression was incredibly stern, and the number of changes in his seals was several times more than what the old man from Hidden Dragon Sect had done. The Shaman Mountain that had revealed itself on the ground was trembling even more furiously. A large amount of dust was sucked into the sky, and the bottom of the mountain was even floating a few inches off the ground as it trembled. At that moment, as Di Tian pressed his palm against the eyeball and the power of the world continued surging into it, the first cracks started showing signs of healing at an incredible speed. As it rapidly shrank, when Su Ming sent out a large amount of seals into the eyeball, the first hole disappeared and was completely mended. Not a single trace of it could be seen, and it looked no different from before. Soon after, the expressionless Di Tian used the same method and pointed at the second hole. Once the power of the world surged into it, Di Tian turned his head around and looked towards Su Ming, then lifted his foot and took a step towards him. His body disappeared swiftly, and almost at the instant he did so, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Without any hesitation, he immediately retreated along with the eyeball. In an instant, he retreated 10,000 feet. At the same time, the air where he had been previously let out a bang, and countless cracks appeared, as if an invisible fist had rammed into that spot. Once the cracks appeared, they disappeared one by one. Di Tian walked out from that spot and took another step towards Su Ming. Yet this time, the instant Di Tian took a step forward, Su Ming, who was 10,000 feet away, suddenly lifted his head. Killing intent shone in his eyes, and he pushed forward with both hands, pushing the eyeball towards Di Tian. Execution, hidden eyes. Including today, it had been 3 consecutive days of explosive power, and Di Tian was incredibly tired. Yet today, he was prepared to go crazy once more. He would guarantee that he would have a lot of explosive power from 4 chapters. If he could get 400 votes, then he would have a 5th chapter today. Would he be able to get it today? To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 430. As Su Ming spoke, the eyeball grew in the wind as it moved forward. It grew larger swiftly and turned into the size of a fist. Red threads filled it, and the picture of the 8 trigrams could be seen faintly. Due to its unique appearance, it gave off an enchanting and ferocious air. At the instant Su Ming threw the eyeball out, a faint glint appeared in Di Tian's eyes as he walked towards him, but he did not stop for even a single moment. Right from the start, he remained the same. It was as if there was no one in the world and no power that could make him stop for even a single moment as he moved forward. Not even Hidden Dragon Sect's ancient art. Besides, even though this ancient art had a great background, the old man from Hidden Dragon Sect could only cast a small part of it. Even if the red-haired Su Ming had perfected it slightly, it was still not as good as a real ancient art. Yet even so, it was still an ancient art, and it belonged to an incredibly high level among all divine abilities and arts. The power contained within it was so great that it could destroy the world. Once the eyeball swelled up, the picture of the 8 trigrams shone in it, and a dark power spread out from it. When that power spread out, the originally bright sky instantly became much darker. There were also sounds that sounded like murmurs, but no one could hear what they were saying clearly. They echoed in the sky and earth. Those sounds grew louder and more numerous, eventually becoming so loud that it shook the sky and earth and was deafening to the ears. It was as if there were an innumerable amount of people who could not be seen mumbling at the same time in the invisible area. At the same time, the picture of the 8 trigrams in the eyeball started rotating slowly. It started rotating faster, and in the blink of an eye, it could no longer be seen clearly. Di Tian's expression remained as calm as ever as he walked forward, as if he was completely unbothered by the strangeness of the eyeball and the endless mumbling sound around him. He only formed a seal with his right hand, and as he moved forward, he pointed at the eyeball. I am the heavens. All manner of living are under the heavens, and under me. The heavens have given all manner of living different souls. If I am unwilling, then I will take those souls back and give birth to the souls seized by the heavens. When Di Tian said those calm and emotionless words tumbling out of his mouth, he pointed at the eyeball through the air with his right index finger. At the instant he did so, the picture of the 8 trigrams in the eyeball started rotating rapidly and slowed down. The mumbling sound around him seemed to have reached a certain level before they instantly started showing signs of diminishing, becoming much weaker. From the looks of it, it would only take a few breaths for it to completely disappear. Su Ming's expression immediately turned dark. He was once again shocked by Di Tian's level of cultivation. As his expression changed, Su Ming immediately bit the tip of his tongue and coughed out a mouthful of blood before letting out a low growl. Righteous technique, break. I burial, explode. At the instant Su Ming said those words, a red light shone on the eyeball. As a large amount of light spread out, the eyeball exploded with a bang, and as it did so, the rotating 8 trigrams broke free from it. Once they absorbed all the impact formed by the eyeball's explosion, they charged towards Di Tian with a loud whistle. At the same time, the murmurs in the surroundings increased by several times. All of the voices rushed towards Di Tian, causing a large amount of ripples and distortions to appear around him. Su Ming knew that it would be difficult for this art to affect Di Tian too much, but it should be able to stop him for the span of a few breaths. At that moment, he did not bother looking at the results of the ancient art. As he retreated, he formed a seal with his hands, and as the enchanting red in his hair shone, the red light in Su Ming's eyes became even stronger. In fact, a red that surged into the sky spread out from his entire body, and it was the same for his skin. That red was like fresh blood, and it was a terrifying sight to behold. I refuse to believe that I can't even kill a projection of yours. A ferocious look appeared on Su Ming's face. As he formed a seal with his hands, he turned around, and with it, he turned into a red whirlwind. As whistling sounds reverberated in the air, A large amount of blood spots immediately appeared on Su Ming's skin. Once those blood spots appeared, blood immediately seeped out. The moment that blood appeared, it was immediately swept away by the whirlwind. Several breaths later, a layer of blood fog filled the area around the red whirlwind. That was Su Ming's blood. Blood art. Su Ming's voice came from within the whirlwind. At that moment, his face was pale. Most of the blood in his body had been forced out, and he executed this forbidden divine ability that he could only cast when he was at the peak of his condition. At the instant Su Ming said those words, the whirlwind in which he was located came to an abrupt halt. Once the whirlwind stopped, the blood fog on it used the power of the whirlwind to spread out and fill the sky, dyeing it red in an instant. At the same time, Su Ming stomped down with his right foot and charged into the sky, disappearing into the blood fog that filled the air. Bathed the heavens in blood. At the moment Su Ming disappeared, it was as if the sky itself was roaring. Muffled buzzing sounds spread out, and a large amount of blood fog appeared in the sky. In just a moment, as the fog continued growing thicker, it turned into a wave of blood. With the sky as the sea and blood as its color, the entire sky turned into an endless sea of blood. That sea of blood roared and tumbled about in the sky, stirring up raging waves. From a distance, this scene looked as if the apocalypse had arrived, causing all those who saw it to feel their hearts tremble in disbelief. As the waves tumbled about in the sea of blood that filled the sky, a gigantic face protruded out from within. That face occupied most of the sea, and by the looks of it, it belonged to Su Ming. It was as if the sea of blood was his hair, and his body had turned endlessly large. Like the might of the heavens, he roared at Dition in the sky, stirring up the sea of blood and charging towards the man. At that moment, the distortions and ripples formed by the endless mumbling sound stirred up by the hidden execution of justice art had already disappeared, revealing Dition. He lifted his right hand, and on his palm was the picture of the 8 trigrams that had charged towards him while spinning. He grabbed the picture of the 8 trigrams and lifted his head to look at the sky. With a squeeze of his right hand, the picture of the 8 trigrams immediately crumbled and turned into an endless amount of powder that fell from Dition's right hand. They turned into glittering sparks that flickered a few times before disappearing. With a wave of my arm, I can bathe the sun and moon. How dare you dirty the sky before me? Dition's expression was calm. As he spoke flatly, he lifted his arm and swung it towards the sky in the face of the sea of blood that was swiftly charging towards him from the sky, along with Su Ming's blood shadow. With it, the emperor's robe on his body immediately shone and seemed to have become slightly darker. Even some wrinkles appeared on his skin, but if no one looked closely, it would be difficult to notice them. However, it was clear that while this so-called flick of his arm that could bathe the sun and moon might seem simple, it was in truth not a simple flick of his arm to Dition. The instant Dition swung his arm, a ray of golden light erupted from his body. As he waved his arm, that golden light rose into the air and spread out in the sky above him, as if a golden ocean had been formed under the sea of blood. That golden ocean was filled with a mighty power. Compared to the bizarre aura of the sea of blood, if anyone else was watching by the side, their first impression would definitely be that the red-haired Su Ming was an evil being, and Dition was a righteous being. The golden ocean swept up a large amount of light, and as it continued getting closer to the sea of blood, its appearance started changing. It turned into the shape of a sleeve, and it was a golden sleeve formed by the golden ocean. It was flung towards the incoming sea of blood. Both sides crashed into each other in an instant, and a loud boom that shook the sky and earth spread through a small part of the land of the shamans. The tremors that stirred up spread through the sky, causing all the powerful shamans to notice it. The powerful berserkers also sensed it, and their hearts trembled. The booming sounds continued reverberating in the air. The sea of blood in the sky shattered, and once it was swept up by the golden sleeve, it shattered. Once it turned back into blood fog, it was torn apart once again, and eventually the scattered blood fog gathered together in midair and turned into Su Ming. At that moment, there was blood trickling down the corners of Su Ming's mouth. His face was pale, and his fiery red hair had also become dull. There were many parts of his robes that were torn. Once he appeared, he retreated several thousands of feet and coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. A crimson glare appeared in his eyes. I can't accept this. It's impossible that I can't even fight against one of his clones. Su Ming stared at Di Tian in the distance. Di Tian's strength had surpassed his vague memories, and at the same time he felt bitter. He also felt a strong unwillingness to admit defeat. Di Tian's expression was still as aloof as ever. He lifted his foot and walked towards Su Ming. He had always been like this, unhurried and unhurried, as if he was a king walking in his own world. It was as if even if the sky fell and the earth shattered before him, he would not be affected in the slightest. Perhaps there was truly nothing in the world that could cause even a ripple in his heart. Since you are unwilling to be sealed, then I will grant you your wish. I will make your soul disappear and separate your spirit from your physical body. You were originally a person who should have died, but due to my seal, you were able to avoid heaven's punishment. Now that your soul has disappeared, you will have to face heaven's punishment once again. As the heavens, I will grant you heaven's punishment. Di Tian spoke languidly. As he walked towards Su Ming, he lifted his right hand and swung it at the sky. You are not a soul of this land. You do not need the Berserker's punishment. Let the world change, and you will become an immortal. As Di Tian swung his arm, a strange change appeared in the sky. The sky instantly turned dark, but it was not covered. Instead, the sky that could be seen turned dark, as if the sun and moon had turned upside down. The sky was dotted with stars, but at that moment, those stars started becoming indistinct. Quite a number of them started moving, and in the blink of an eye, a shocking sight appeared in the sky. The stars in the sky were enough to make the shamans and berserkers feel unfamiliar. This was no longer the sky of the berserkers. This sky caused the hearts of all the immortals in the land of South Morning to palpitate and fall into a daze, because this sky belonged to the immortals. If the real Su Ming woke up at that moment, then he would immediately be able to recognize that this sky was practically the same as the illusory galaxy that appeared when the Elder used the flag to change the sky in Dark Mountain all those years ago. It's not too difficult for me to get 400 votes for the second release. Please give me the last bit of motivation. I need to work hard for the 5th release after I've worked hard for 3 days. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 431. When the red-haired Su Ming saw Di Tian changing the sky with a wave of his arm, a deep anguish appeared on his face. So his level of cultivation has already reached this level. This is the power equivalent to that of a Lord of World Plains after he fused with the immortal sky. But even so, I won't give up. So what if he's a Lord of World Plains? The red-haired Su Ming sucked in a deep breath and forced down the anguish in his heart. A determined look appeared on his face. He did not bother himself with Di Tian casting his art. Instead, he took a step towards the ground and landed several tens of thousands of feet away. The ground was soft, and since he had lost some of his soul, Su Ming felt as if he had stepped into mud when he landed on the ground. A small part of his body sank into the ground. He decided to sit down cross-legged and placed his hands on the ground by his side. He closed his eyes and started mumbling. At that moment, Di Tian was watching Su Ming's actions coldly. Once he swung his arm and changed the sky, he pushed his 5 fingers toward the sky. Heaven's punishment is 9 by 9. With thy sins, thou shalt suffer 6 by 7. 6 by 7 heaven's punishment contains 3 deaths, and the first shall be the dragon of Een. As Di Tian spoke, chilling wind immediately stirred up in the sky belonging to the immortals. That chilling wind had physical form and was a faint green shade. As it gathered together in the sky, it shone faintly with the stars and turned into a long dragon. When it moved, It immediately started pacing about in the sky while letting out ferocious roars. Once the first dragon of Een appeared, a large amount of chilling wind gathered together, and more dragons of Een that shone with the stars appeared one after another. In the end, there were 9 dragons of Een. They roared at the ground in the sky, and their voices rumbled. A destructive presence spread out from their bodies and spread in all directions. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that there were an endless amount of faces within the Een aura that formed the 9 dragons of Een. Those faces looked as if they were imprinted on the dragons of Yin's bodies. The parts that protruded out were their limbs, and they were struggling. Pain appeared on their faces, and their wails turned into the roars of the dragons of Een. Su Ming sat down cross-legged on the ground with a pale face. There were still traces of blood at the corners of his mouth. As he mumbled, the ground gradually lost its softness, and an indistinct layer of air rose from the ground. Earth that exists in this world, I can sense your damage and resentment. I can sense that once your entire body is separated, you will disappear and be destroyed. I need to borrow your power. Please lend me the power that belongs to the earth and the dragon veins. Su Ming's voice echoed in the air. The aura around him grew stronger, and from the sky, it looked as if the ground where Su Ming stood had turned into a pool of fog. However, compared to the entire land of South Morning, the earthen aura contained in this small lake of fog was insignificant. Di Tian formed a seal with his right hand and pointed at the sky again. Of the 7 heavenly punishments, the second is emptiness. Di Tian's voice was calm. When it traveled out, the sky belonging to the immortals immediately started rumbling. Gigantic bumps gradually appeared in the sky as if they were slowly descending, and they gradually protruded out from the ground. Each of those bumps was filled with a murky air, and there was a foul stench spreading out from within them. It was as if there were all the most filthy things in the world contained within those bumps. This scene would make anyone's skin crawl. The entire sky looked as if it had turned into a toad's skin. While the large number of bumps were filthy, there was a dark light shining within them. If anyone took a closer look, they would find that there were 67 of those bumps. Su Ming's face turned even paler. He opened his eyes. The earthen aura around him that he had borrowed might seem like a lot, but in truth, it was not enough. Anguish appeared on his face. Earth of this world, I call upon you in my name. Earthen aura will turn into dragons, and after a long period of time, it will turn into veins. I need your help. Awaken, dragon veins of the earth. Awaken, the power that belongs to the earth. In my name, awaken. Veins popped up on Su Ming's hands, which were pressed against the ground. He gripped the ground tightly, and immediately, layers of fog seeped out from his body. As it spread out, a circular area of 10 lis, then 100 lis, then 1,000 lis, then 10,000 lis. Once the fog seeped out of the ground, it turned into a sea of fog that covered 10,000 lis, and that area was still continuously spreading out. However, Su Ming's face was still filled with anguish. He might have borrowed quite a lot of earthen aura and it was still spreading out, but it was still scattered. Even if this earthen aura gathered together into the shape of a dragon with his divine ability, it would just be an illusion. It was just like the earthen aura he had summoned a few days ago. He could use it to deal with normal people, but if he used it to fight against Di Tian, it would be the same as throwing an egg against a stone. Unless he could awaken the dragon veins in the land of South Morning, then he would have a chance of fighting against Di Tian, or else everything would just be an illusion. The third of the 7 heavenly punishments is spiritual life. Di Tian's voice reverberated in the sky, and there was an awe-inspiring and relaxed tone to his voice, as if he did not care about the red-haired Su Ming running away. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he could control everything in the world he was in. Once he spoke, a dark light suddenly shone in the murky air within the 67 pustules that protruded from the sky. Creatures that looked like cicadas appeared faintly within them. These creatures looked similar to cicadas, but they were entirely black and had a ferocious appearance. Once they appeared, They started ramming against the pustules continuously, and screeching sounds could be heard. There was only one of these creatures in each pustule, and there were 67 of them in total. At that moment, Su Ming was staring at the strange sight in the sky as he remained seated. Even if the area of 100,000 lis was filled with fog that was as thick as an ocean and the momentum was astonishing, Su Ming knew that this was still not enough. In my name, awaken, dragon veins of the earth. The red-haired Su Ming gripped the ground tightly with his hands and let out a low roar. The instant he let out that roar, the dragon veins of the earth that had not been awakened for a long time actually responded to his call. During that instant, the entire land of South Morning started trembling lightly. That trembling spread throughout the entire land, and there were 4 spots that trembled even more violently. There were 4.5 dragon veins in the land of South Morning. Besides the half located at the edge of the land to the east, 2 of the remaining 4 dragon veins were located in the land of the shamans, and the remaining 1 was located in the land of the berserkers. At that moment, what shone upon Su Ming was a dragon vein located in the land of the shamans that was several hundreds of thousands of lis away from where he was. It was not a mountain range, but a long river. That long river was the dried-up river not too far away from Su Ming. This was just a small part of its gigantic body. In truth, it was difficult for that river to dry up. Before long, it would recover on its own. Its length practically cut through the land of the shamans. At that moment, as Su Ming spoke, the dragon vein in the long river responded to him, and a large amount of earthen aura immediately rose from the river and charged towards the place where Su Ming was. If anyone looked from the sky, they would see that the earthen aura around Su Ming was becoming thicker, especially the earthen aura coming from the dragon vein from the long river. Once it fused with the earthen aura, it made Su Ming look as if he was surrounded by an azure dragon made of earthen aura. Thou shalt receive the punishment of 6 and 7 heavens. Dition stared at Su Ming coldly from midair, then lifted his right hand and pointed towards Su Ming on the ground. With that one point, the 9 dragons in the sky immediately roared and charged towards Su Ming on the ground. The 9 dragons roared ferociously, and the countless faces on their bodies wailed, causing the sky to be filled with a ghastly aura of een, and even the stars in the sky could not be seen clearly. As the 9 dragons closed in, Su Ming lifted his head from the ground and lifted his hands from the ground to form a seal. He placed his left hand on his right hand and pointed towards the incoming 9 dragons. Dragon vein of the earth, dragon of earthen aura, destroy the sky with the earth. As Su Ming pointed forward, a large mouthful of blood flowed out of the corners of his mouth. At the same time, the azure dragon made of earthen aura around Su Ming lifted its head and let out a roar towards the sky. Its gigantic body did not move completely, but only lifted its head and charged towards the 9 dragons. Compared to its body, the 9 dragons could no longer be considered as dragons. They could only be considered as pythons. The 2 sides crashed into each other in midair in an instant, and booming sounds erupted from the spot where they came into contact. The sound spread rapidly through the area, stirring up a large amount of ripples and waves of impact, causing cracks that looked like fish scales to appear in the sky and continue spreading. The 9 dragons roared and rammed into the earthen aura dragon. Once they crashed into it, they dissipated and turned into 9 green threads that rushed straight into the earthen aura dragon's body. As they swam about, the earthen aura dragon let out pained roars. A large amount of earthen aura from hundreds of thousands of lis surged towards Su Ming, and the 9 green threads finally disappeared into the earthen aura dragon's body once they swam about 10,000 feet. Yet at that moment, Su Ming's body started trembling violently, and he coughed up a huge mouthful of blood. 9 green threads appeared on his body, and they swam about on his skin, causing Su Ming to suffer unimaginable pain. Cold sweat broke out all over his body. This heart-wrenching pain was enough to make a powerful warrior's mind break down. But Su Ming started laughing in the midst of this intense pain. He did not chuckle lightly, but threw his head back and laughed loudly. This bit of pain is nothing. Tion, do you have any other tricks up your sleeves? Bring them all out. Su Ming's face was stark pale. As he laughed, the pain in his body became even more intense. The 9 green threads had already disappeared from his skin and were crawling into his body. Su Ming decided not to bear with the pain and simply allowed it to spread out. He struggled to lift his hands and pointed at Tion. Immediately, the dragon made of earthen aura around him roared and charged towards Tion. Tion's expression remained aloof. He stood there without dodging, but before the dragon made of earthen aura could close in on him, the 67 bumps in the sky cracked at the same time. As they did so, a large amount of liquid poured down from the sky like rain. A foul stench filled the entire world. As the filthy rain fell, the dragon made of earthen aura was drenched in it. It trembled and let out shrill screams of pain. Its body continued shrinking, and a large amount of earthen aura around Su Ming rapidly decreased. I hope I can break through the 5th chapter. I crave this motivation. I beg for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 432. At the same time, as Su Ming endured the heart-wrenching pain from the green threads, bumps appeared on various parts of his body. These bumps were practically the same as the ones that had shattered in the sky previously, causing Su Ming to no longer look like a human. That pain caused Su Ming's laughter to grow louder. He leapt up, and, as the dragon of earthen aura continued shrinking, he formed a seal with his hands and rushed into the dragon's body. Then, with the dragon of earthen aura, he charged towards the immortal sky. As the 67 bumps shattered in the sky, 67 black insects that looked like cicadas but had grown wings rushed out. As these strange insects hissed, they also charged towards the dragon of earthen aura. Both parties crashed into each other once again in the sky. Booming sounds reverberated in the air, and the dragon of earthen aura flew up from the ground. Su Ming did not bother himself with the insects crawling into his body. Neither did he bother himself with the intense pain in his body. With the dragon of earthen aura, he charged towards the immortal sky. Tion, if you can bring down divine punishment on me, then I would rather destroy the sky and destroy my immortal bloodline. I would no longer be an immortal. As the red-haired Su Ming roared, he and the dragon of earthen aura crashed into the sky. Rumbling sounds reverberated in the air, and ripples appeared in the sky. Ripples appeared, and signs of its shattering appeared. Yet at the same time, the dragon of earthen aura shattered inch by inch, and once it crashed into the sky, it shattered and disappeared. Su Ming coughed out a huge mouthful of blood. There was not a single part of his body that did not hurt. His body was surrounded by a large amount of black insects, and an aura of death had already appeared on his body. As for the sky belonging to the immortals, there was only a small crack on it, and that crack was rapidly healing up. Thy appearance was an accident. Everything is over. Under this divine punishment of 6 to 7 days, thy soul will scatter, and everything will return to its original path. Over? Not yet. Once Tion's words were spoken, the red-haired Su Ming, whose body was being bitten by the large swarm of black insects. The boils all over his body were shattering. The 9 green threads were tearing at his organs, and the aura of death was thick, let out a strange voice. I remember now. I'm not Su Ming. I'm Hong Luo. I am Patriarch Red Silk. Su Ming's eyes were originally closed, but at that moment, he opened them swiftly, and a brilliant light shone in them. At the instant before he died and his soul disappeared, his originally blurry memories of life and death suddenly became clear. He remembered his identity. He remembered his name. I am Ancestor Hong Luo, the son of an immortal emperor. Am I right, my dear senior brother Tion? Light shone in Su Ming's eyes. He shuddered and immediately spread his divine sense outwards, causing the insects to be pushed back 10 feet, but they were not injured. Instead, They rushed towards him once again. I remember now. Back then, you had your reservations and didn't dare to kill me, so you sealed me in Destiny's body. I remember now. Destiny? Haha. Could this body be Destiny's body? I remember now. This is the land of berserkers. This is the home of the first god of berserkers. Once the first god of berserkers left, you and the others slaughtered your way into this place to carry out the plan to kill the second god of berserkers. When you came back, you brought back a pair of babies. One of them was dead, and the other was alive. The one that was alive should be the body I'm in right now. This is the baby my father named Destiny after he personally inspected it, the red-haired Su Ming said in a ghastly voice. Di Tian's expression remained aloof. He did not speak, but lifted his right hand and pointed at the red-haired Su Ming. Immediately, all the boils on Su Ming's body started festering. The insects around him surged towards him and crawled into the festering areas, devouring them madly. The 9 green threads also pierced into Su Ming's heart. A strange smile suddenly appeared on the red-haired Su Ming's lips as he was surrounded by the aura of death. My dear senior brother, have you forgotten that I have an art? This is also the reason why you couldn't kill me in the past. The origin ancient art that belongs to the royal bloodline of the immortals. I can take 10 lives. The instant the red-haired Su Ming's smile appeared, his life force swiftly disappeared and he breathed his last. However, the instant he died, the life force that had disappeared immediately appeared once again. This time, it made his presence much stronger than before. The black bugs that had burrowed into his body immediately retreated and exploded outside his body, turning into a large cloud of black fog that swept outwards. His body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. The wounds caused by the pustules and rotting pustules actually healed in an instant. Even the 9 green lines that had burrowed into his body were forced back into his skin, as if they were about to be completely forced out of his body. If I say you must die, then you must die, because there is no other way around a king's life. Di Tian's expression still did not change as he spoke languidly. However, the instant he said those words, the recovery of the red-haired Su Ming's life force was abruptly halted. Not only was it halted, it even started showing signs of reversing. The healed wounds appeared once again, and the 9 green threads that had been forced under his skin crawled back into Su Ming's body once again. The black fog that had dissipated from the collapse of the black insects around him appeared out of nowhere and gathered together to turn into the 67 black insects once again. As if time was flowing in reverse, they charged towards Su Ming. This is the ancient art that belongs to the royal bloodline of the immortals. You actually mastered it. Looks like my father is dead. The red-haired Su Ming's face was pale as he spoke in anguish. You shouldn't have woken up in the first place. The time for the seal to be broken is far from now. Now that things have been restored, everything will return to normal, Di Tian stated calmly. He lifted his right hand and swung his arm at the red-haired Su Ming. Immediately, an illusory gust of wind appeared before the red-haired Su Ming. The instant it touched his body, the red-haired Su Ming's entire body was surrounded by the aura of death. A large part of his body started rotting, and he was torn apart by the black insects. His organs had already been pierced through by the green threads, and there was only a sliver of his life force left, and that sliver was rapidly disappearing. As the wind from Di Tian swung his arm blue against Su Ming's body, a wave of red mist instantly spread out from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, turning into an illusory figure behind him. That figure's appearance was different from Su Ming's. It was handsome, and there was an enchanting air about it. This was Hong Luo. At that moment, his illusory body was rapidly disappearing. Once his soul was forced out of Su Ming's body, the insect crawled out and charged towards his soul. The 9 green threads also flew out and crawled into Hong Luo's disappearing soul. At the same time, 67 bumps appeared on Hong Luo's illusory figure, and they were rapidly shattering. Am I going to die? Is this the feeling of death? But I won't regret it. A dazed look appeared on the illusory figure's face, and he started laughing loudly. As his soul left Su Ming's body, the gust of wind that blew against Su Ming's body surged into his body in a domineering manner, causing the injuries to his organs to instantly heal. The rotting on his body also disappeared in an instant, causing his body to look the same as when he was not injured. That power in his body started cleaning up the power Hong Luo had left behind in Su Ming's body, which had become stronger. Everything was just as Di Tian had said. He wanted to set things right. He wanted to return everything to the time before this accident happened, so that everything would go according to his will. He would not allow any more accidents to happen. Yet right at the instant Di Tian's power was setting things right in Su Ming's body, Hong Luo, who was about to disappear, saw something in his dazed state. A stunned look immediately appeared on his face, and a glint suddenly appeared in his eyes, and he looked towards Su Ming, who had his eyes tightly shut. Destiny. Destiny. I understand now, Di Tian, I understand now. So this is your plan? If that's the case, then let me help him before I die. Hong Luo suddenly started laughing loudly. A strange light appeared in his eyes, and the instant his body disappeared, the illusory figure of his soul suddenly started burning. The ancient inheritance of the immortal's blood, the path to life. As Hong Luo laughed loudly, only his head was left of his soul. As it burned, two rays of dark light shone in his eyes and flew out to land on Su Ming's body. All of this happened too quickly. For the first time, a change appeared on Di Tian's face. He lifted his right hand and pointed forward. The instant the two rays of dark light closed in on Su Ming, they immediately crumbled and turned into dark sparks that scattered away. Yet at that moment, the scattered dark light gathered together once again, and with a speed that Di Tian did not have time to stop, it seeped into the center of Su Ming's brows. Once it seeped into the center of his brows, the power of the dark light exploded within Su Ming's body with a bang and crashed into the power Di Tian had left in Su Ming's body to clear his cultivation base. The clash between the two powers in his body caused blood to trickle out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth while he remained unconscious, and his body fell to the ground. Even Di Tian did not notice that Su Ming's falling body had charged towards the octagonal altar at the top of the Shaman Mountain, and a stone coffin at the center of the altar, under the guidance of the dark light Hong Luo, had left in Su Ming's body. At that moment, as the illusory figure of Hong Luo's soul continued burning, he gradually disappeared into midair. However, his laughter and his voice continued echoing endlessly in the world. I have lived for 30,000 years before my Tao. When I look back, I will no longer be an immortal. Hong Luo's ancient voice gradually faded away, but his words still echoed in Di Tian's ears, and they also echoed in Su Ming's soul. With a bang, Su Ming's body landed on the coffin at the center of the octagonal tower. Blood flowed down from the corners of his mouth and fell on the coffin. Without any expression on his face, Di Tian turned around and walked towards the ground, towards Su Ming, who was lying on the lid of the coffin at the center of the octagonal altar at the top of the mountain. The emperor's robe on his body had already lost its luster. Even the emperor's crown had lost its golden luster. A large number of wrinkles had appeared on his face, and at that moment, he no longer looked like a middle-aged man. Clearly, the battle against Hong Luo was not as easy as it seemed. Everything is ended. Di Tian walked to the octagonal altar, but the instant he got closer to Su Ming for the first time, his expression changed drastically, because he saw a pair of eyes. Su Ming opened his eyes. As long as he had 400 votes, his ears would explode with excitement. He would long for the monthly votes and fight for first place. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 433. The sky was blue, and there were white clouds floating about. It was very beautiful, but the coldness beneath him, the cold air around him, the inability to open his eyes, and the stabbing pain in his body caused the blue sky to become a color in his memory, and the white clouds to become a picture in his imagination. Everything was torn apart, and all that was left was loneliness, grief, and an indescribable fear. Today is a good day, Big Brother. The sky is blue, and there are many white clouds. Look, this cloud looks like a little rabbit, and this one, looks like a big gray wolf. The childish voice in his ears seemed to cause the darkness in front of him to gradually dissipate. Everything that was torn apart began to heal, and the blue sky reappeared. There was also a rabbit-shaped cloud in the sky, and next to it the big gray wolf cloud also appeared. Ah, Big Brother, this cloud looks like you, very much like you. There's another cloud next to it that looks like me. That childish voice was the only warmth in this dark world. And it was also this voice that explained the differences in color, telling him what was black, what was blue, and what was white. Every time this voice appeared, he didn't feel cold, he didn't feel lonely, and he didn't feel like there were countless nights in the endless darkness. Even if the pain in his body became more and more unbearable, even if he could feel someone making a cut on his body every once in a while, causing blood to flow out, he didn't feel uncomfortable anymore. As long as he could hear this voice often, as long as he could hear it for the rest of his life. Big Brother, cultivation is so tiring. I don't even want to cultivate anymore, but Daddy said that you must cultivate or else you will die. Big Brother, don't die. I will cultivate. I'm not tired at all. Not tired? But if she's not tired, why is her voice so weak? I can't see, but I can feel that she's very tired. What does my death have to do with her cultivation? Daddy, is it that cold voice? If it is, don't listen to him. Every time he comes, I'll be in so much pain that I can't even die. He called me Destiny. Is that my name? It should be, it shouldn't be. Brother, it's a sunny day today. Aya, it's been a sunny day for a long, long time. I guess it must be because you like sunny days, that's why. Is it a sunny day? Silly girl, the only thing that exists in my body besides my hearing is my senses. The umbrella you're holding doesn't cover my feet. That drop of water on my feet is rain, right? It should be. I've heard from others here that it has been raining for a month. Big Brother, I see that the other big sisters are all in. They're very beautiful, but why am I so small? I'm only 1 year younger than them, but I still look like a child. But Big Brother, you are very handsome. Hee hee. I heard from some senior sisters that they like the feeling of being by your side. Big Brother, please wake up quickly. Okay, Dad said you're going to wake up soon, but he's been telling me that ever since I was a kid. Like the feeling of being by my side, huh? But why is it that every time your senior sisters come here, a lot of the aura in my body disappears? Silly girl, they don't like me. They just like the fact that they can absorb the immortal aura in my body when they're in my body. This is something I overheard when they were talking about it. They thought I couldn't hear it. Silly girl, everyone here has ill intentions towards us. I've overheard too many of their conversations. Big Brother, Dad has been acting strange lately. He often hits me. I've been working hard on my cultivation, and I've already done as he asked. I've always helped the other sect members train, and every time they surround me and train together, I feel my body growing weaker. I feel like their gazes are different when they look at me. It's as if they're looking at medicinal cores. Damned immortals. As long as I can open my eyes one day and move my body, I will kill all of you. It's one thing for you to absorb my immortal aura, but you won't even spare her. She's just a child. Why must you do this for your cultivation? Why must you do this? Could it be that you haven't absorbed enough of my immortal aura? None of you have my immortal aura in your bodies. I swear that if I can stand up one day, I will definitely make all of you pay the price. Big Brother, I'm very tired today. Let me lie down for a while. I'm very sleepy. Go to sleep. I'll protect you. I'll send my immortal power into your body. That way, you won't be tired tomorrow. If only I could see and tell the difference between day and night. If only I could find you in the sea of people and hold your hand. How good would that be? If only I could stand up and fly in the sky with you. If only I could go to the ends of the sky and the ends of the earth with you. How good would that be? If only I could speak and laugh with you, point at the sky with you, and draw the blue sky and white clouds with you. How good would that be? But I can't. I can't see, I can't move, and I can't speak. My world is black, and there's no color. There's only pain in my body and loneliness. Big brother, I've been feeling sleepy lately. I feel like I've become shorter, and I'm not pretty. No one likes me. I can tell. Big brother, you're the only one who's with me, right? Big brother, does your body hurt? Don't be sad. I have my own plans. When my cultivation is high enough, I'll bring you away. Silly girl, it's useless. I understand them. He's not your father, nor is he my father. His name is Tion. Big brother, I won't be able to visit you for some time. They want me to go to a place. When I come back, I'll visit you again. Big brother, hurry up and wake up. I can feel the tears on my body. I can feel a cold gaze staring at me beside the tears. Fey air, it's time to go. That cold voice reverberated and gradually faded away. My world became black again. Her voice was no longer there. There was no blue sky and no white clouds. There was only emptiness, loneliness, coldness, rain, snow, bone-piercing wind, and endless pain in my body. There was also the disgusting aura and absorption of my body. There was also the passing of time. I didn't know how many years had passed. The voice in my ears never appeared again. My time was as black as ever. I want to open my eyes. I have to open my eyes because I want to search for you. I want to search for the blue sky that belongs to me. I want to search for the color of that blue sky and the sound of happiness. I want to get up because so many years have passed and there has been no news of you. Where are you? My little sister, are you well? I want to speak because I want to question everyone. How are you now? You don't become like me. Because you're my eyes. Of the two babies Tion brought back in the past, the one who lived was you, and the one who died was me. It was a dream. Su Ming opened his eyes and saw the sky, saw the clouds, saw the colors in the world, and the dream that made him grieve was still in his head. Confusion appeared in his eyes, but that confusion only appeared for an instant before it turned into a deathly stillness. It was a pair of eyes filled with a deathly stillness, so calm that it was terrifying. The instant Tion saw that gaze, his heart, which had been as calm as an ancient well, trembled violently. Su Ming looked at Tion and slowly sat up from the coffin. The scar left behind by Dark Mountain on his face was shining with a blood-red light, causing Su Ming to look as if he was filled with an evil and ghastly air. At the instant Su Ming saw Tion, his pupils shrank. Countless pictures suddenly flashed in his eyes before they eventually fixed on a middle-aged man sitting cross-legged on a gigantic head in an endless dark space. He was not dressed in an emperor's robe, but was dressed in a long robe. The person wearing the emperor's robe before him was incredibly similar to that middle-aged man. Tion, we meet again. Su Ming lowered his head and rubbed the center of his brows. A barely noticeable glint appeared in his eyes, and he stood up from the coffin. His hair was no longer red, but had returned to its original color. The mark of the peach blossom at the center of his brows was still there, but it had become much duller. For the first time, Tion's pupils shrank. He did not speak, but only stared at Su Ming as if he was observing him. Su Ming rubbed his brows with his left hand. The instant his gaze swept past the coffin by his side, for some unknown reason, his heart trembled. It was as if it was empty, and a pain that made him feel as if he was suffocating appeared in his heart. The black pictures appeared once again in his eyes. Those were all the things that happened in his dream, along with that youthful voice. Su Ming's heart trembled. He was incredibly bewildered by everything before his eyes. He only remembered that he was struck by Madame G's peach blossom fiend, which had stirred up the most primal desires in his body. Once he went to White Bull Tribe, he forced them down and struggled his way back to the mountain range outside his cave abode. Before he could no longer control himself, he used Han Mountain Bell to seal himself, then fell into a long period of unconsciousness. Even if he occasionally woke up, he would only remember that he was in Han Mountain Bell. When he fell unconscious for the final time, he opened his eyes, and he saw the person who made his heart tremble. The man in the emperor's robe was the person who had appeared sitting on the head in the void for an unknown number of years when he was possessed by Han Mountain's ancestor. This person's appearance caused Su Ming's heart to tremble. He should have been unable to control this change in his emotions, but for some unknown reason, he managed to control this change in his emotions in an incredibly ingenious manner. It was as if this was some sort of instinct that was awakening within him. But that was not all. Su Ming also noticed that his mind seemed to have become much clearer than before. Faintly, some of the unfamiliar yet familiar pictures would occasionally flash in his mind, as if these were his memories to begin with, but they had been sealed away. Now, as he woke up, these memories started showing signs of returning. It was especially so the moment he saw the coffin. That strong feeling caused him to pat the coffin lightly with his right hand, even though he looked calm on the outside. With it, the coffin's lid immediately shattered and turned into an endless amount of shards that spread out, revealing the item within the coffin clearly. There was a stone statue lying within the coffin. That statue was of a woman with long hair. She was not very pretty, and there was a hint of pain on her face, causing her to look pitiful. She had a petite figure that did not seem to have gone through puberty. She looked like she was only 15 or 16 years old, but there was an ancient look on her face that could not be hidden, and it clearly showed her true age. That statue was incredibly lifelike. Practically everything about the woman was carved out, and it was clear that it was not carved by a human. When Su Ming woke up, he looked at the stone statue in the coffin, and a thunderous roar rose in his heart. This was the first time he saw the woman's face, but for some unknown reason, the instant he saw her, his heart clenched in pain. The young voice from his dreams echoed in his ears once again. "Big brother, the sky is blue. Big brother, I'm a little tired. Big brother, they asked me to go to a place. I'll come and see you when I come back. Brother, wake up quickly." To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 434. I haven't reached 400 votes, but I've already written the 5th chapter. What should I do? It's true that I want to save it, but I have always been kind and honest. I can't save a draft, so I'll just send it up. Everyone, you can't hurt an honest person. If you keep hurting him, he will become crafty. So, at this moment in the morning, I have to give my recommendation and monthly votes. 13 chapters in 3 days. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.